Hey guys, this is Frankie Saenz, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Connor.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio. Dennis Shkradov here with Kasper Ozolowski on another big show of Submission Radio, post-UFC career, which has exceeded expectations, Cass, this weekend.
Yeah, a great card all around. We're going to be talking about UFC career, breaking down the main card. Also, we have some guests on the show. We've got Ricardo Lamas opening the show, returning to Submission Radio after his big win over Diego Sanchez. We've also got a Submission Radio debutee, is that what they call it? First time on Submission Radio, there it is. Mike Dolce. We were going to chat to him before UFC 193. We've actually got him to talk a little bit about Ronda Rousey and Holly Holm and some things like that. And of course, when you get Mike Dolce on the show, you have to talk about nutrition and just even some of the crazy allegations that other people in the industry have accused him of. So we've got Mike Dolce, and then wrapping up our interview segment will be the California kid himself, Urijah Faber. He's obviously facing Frankie Saenz at the very, very stacked UFC 194. So we've got Urijah on the show to talk about a whole bunch of things. It's a pretty stacked show.
That's right, guys. And if you haven't had a chance, jump on the social media, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS, and on Twitter @Submission AUS. We've got some technique of the weeks that you can check out, featuring John Wayne Parcast. The first one is the Thai step-up knee. We're going to have a whole bunch of techniques coming from John Wayne Parr over the next few weeks, so look out for that. All the previous techniques, if you haven't checked them out over the last month or two, are from Jake Matthews, so check that out. And also a lot of old school retro techniques from previous Submission Radio Technique of the Weeks to check out. Lots of cool jiu-jitsu techniques and MMA techniques, to jump on there and check it out.
Yeah, it's a cool way to break a leg. Definitely, yeah, there's a whole bunch of John Wayne Parr coming up. Also, shout out to our good friends at FightLiveTV.com. And a great segue here, because John Wayne Parr is actually going to be competing on the 5th of December. In case you don't know, FightLiveTV.com, it's where all the Aussies can go and check out events like Cage Muay Thai, Glory, I believe Lion Fights, a whole bunch of other things. John Wayne Parr is going to be fighting Cyrus Washington on 5th of December. It's going to be 7 p.m. on FightLiveTV.com. Cage Muay Thai 7, just to give you a bit of background, it's going to be a crazy event with fighters from America, Ireland, New Zealand. And again, main event, John Wayne Parr versus Cyrus Washington. John Wayne Parr looking to bounce back from his latest loss. Also, Glory 26 Amsterdam is going to be on the 5th of December. That's a Saturday. Glory 26 is going to be heading to Amsterdam with two of its champions, Rico Verhoeven and Nikki Holzken, set to defend their respective belts in their homeland. So both of those can be checked out at FightLiveTV.com.
And with that, guys, it's time to kick off the show. Like you mentioned, Cass, Ricardo Lamas is up first, and I believe he's on the phone ready to go.
All right, guys, returning to the program is the number 4th ranked featherweight in the UFC. He's a former title challenger and is the man who most recently beat Diego Sanchez in Monterrey, Mexico. Ricardo Lamas, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you today?
I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Well, very well now that you're on the program, Ricardo. Now, give us the lowdown. Thanksgiving was recently in America. What's the damage? How much food did Ricardo Lamas eat? What kind of weight class are we coming back to? Are we looking at heavyweight? Tell us what happened.
It wasn't too bad. I definitely had my fair share of food, and it was good. So I had a great time hanging out with the family, and I didn't do too much damage.
What is the best thing you ate with your family? Is anyone cooking up any secret recipes? Any Ricardo Lamas favorites?
The turkey my brother made was really good this year. It was marinated and in like a lot of garlic and other stuff, so it was real juicy and it was delicious.
What do you know anything about this thing going around? I just read about recently, like a chicken stuffed in a duck stuffed in a turkey. You heard about this?
A Sedurkin?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is this?
Yeah.
Is this,
I've heard about it. I've never seen it myself, but I do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I hear it's a big treat. Now, let's get to business, Ricardo. After the fight with Diego, we saw a picture you posted on your Facebook of fight cankles. Your cankles looked, or your ankles looked insanely swollen. Tell us about that. Did they hurt? Were you injured, or was it just an aesthetic thing?
Basically, I was hitting him hard with those kicks. On one of the last ones, we kind of connected shin to shin, and I gave myself a dead leg, and I just saw that it was hurting him more, so I just kept throwing him harder and harder. And I think that with a combination of the change in pressure in the airplane really swelled my leg up pretty good. So I just took a picture of it when I got home. But now, all the swelling's gone and the leg feels fine now.
Was it both of them or was it just one?
It was just the leg that I was kicking him with that swelled up.
Well, fighting a guy like Diego Sanchez, a guy who was on the first Ultimate Fighter, who is very well known, who will most likely go down as a Hall of Famer, did that change the way you felt about the fight at all on a personal level?
It just made me excited. He's a great competitor. He's a great guy to fight against. I've been a fan of his for a long time. So it was just an honor to be able to step in there with him and gave me a lot of motivation to get in the gym and train really hard.
In this sport, fighters sometimes they come face to face with their idols or people they look up to. Was there anything like that for you? And did you in any way feel bad that you were going to have to beat a guy that is a hero to possibly yourself, but definitely many Latinos and a lot of people out there?
No, there's no hard feelings. We all know why we're in the sport. We all know what we're in for. And when we step in that octagon, it's straight business. We can respect each other outside of the cage, but inside of the cage, we're gonna try and take each other's heads off.
Well, let's talk about the fight for a second, because, it was a great, great fight. The performance itself from yourself was very dominant, but Diego gave you a very good fight. Even though he's known for going to war in the octagon, he was also not having a very good run recently, entering a new weight class. Was any part of you surprised at the way he kept coming and how he fought?
No, not at all. That's classic Diego Sanchez. He keeps coming at you the entire fight. It doesn't matter how badly you're beaten him, he's still going to stay in your face and bring it to you. So it was no surprise that's what he did with me.
What did you think at the weigh-ins? Because a lot of people saw just how drawn out Diego looked. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people were like, oh my God, how's he going to perform the very next day the way he looks? Anything like that go through your mind when you saw him at the weigh-ins?
No, I kind of took all that stuff and put it out of my head. And I really prepared for the best Diego Sanchez that there is. So I didn't want to go into the fight banking on the weight cut being a factor or anything like that. I just went in there and concentrated on what I do best.
Were you surprised when you heard him with those kicks and then you followed up with some head strikes, just the way he kept coming? Did you think at that moment that you were going to put him away?
There were a couple moments where I thought he was going to go down, but, he's just a really tough competitor and he stuck in there. And, the reason I started using those calf from experience, when I started going to train down in Miami at MMA Masters, that's something that they've been using for a really long time. And I felt it and it hurt like hell. So, I picked it up and I started using it. So it didn't surprise me that they were hurting him because I felt them and I know how they feel.
Let me ask you, Ricardo, in the third round, it didn't seem like you focused your targeting on that leg. Was there a particular reason for that?
In the third round, what? What was the question?
It didn't seem like you focused your targeting on that leg. Was there a reason why you laid off his leg for that third round?
He just, I was trying to set up those kicks a little more. I didn't want to just throw it out there. He knew they were coming, and I didn't want to risk him checking it and me hurting my ankle. So I started going upstairs and looking for the head kick because he was expecting the low kick. And later on in the round, I started finding that low kick again and was hurting him with it again.
Before the fight, you spoke about the matchup, just the way that it was a bit of an odd one, didn't necessarily make sense. Are you somewhat relieved that the fight went the way it did? Because obviously you'd be happy with the win, but obviously because a loss to an unranked guy like Diego Sanchez would have really pushed you back in the division and cooled any title aspirations.
Yeah, definitely. It was a risky fight for me to take, given my position in the featherweight division. But it was just a fun fight, Diego is a guy that always brings it, and like I said, it's a very memorable fight for myself, and I'm definitely glad it ended up the way it did.
Looking back on it, it was a really good fight, but I guess going into it, did you think it was strange they would give you a guy like Diego, considering his recent unfortunate run at lightweight, whereas you're ranked number 4th in the division and on a short list of title contenders?
Yeah, at first it was kind of surprising, but given the location of the event in Monterrey, Mexico, I think it was just a great fight for the fans, and I think that's why the UFC went the way they did with it.
Speaking of title aspirations, you're obviously a tremendous fighter and a top featherweight. However, there have been criticisms about your style in the past that you're sometimes too calculated. You're also a guy who keeps a fairly low profile and you're not exactly saying outlandish things. Do you think that this fight did a lot for you because of the sheer excitement factor and just because of the fact that you went to war?
Yeah, I think every win helps out your career, and every great performance helps out your career. And I think this one did help me a lot, and hopefully, another fight or two, and I'll be back in title contention.
Let's talk about the time after you lost to Chad Mendes, Ricardo, because we didn't really hear much from you after that happened. Obviously, Chad went on and he fought Conor McGregor, a fight that everybody knows about. Tell us about what that time was like for you, because you were right there on the cusp of yet another title shot. It was a tough loss against Chad. How did you bounce back from it? What were you getting up to in that time?
Well, right after the fight, the fight was in April, and then my wife was about 7 months pregnant, so we really had to prepare for the birth of our son, and that's what I kind of concentrated on, and that's why I guess, not many people heard from me, but our son came June 22nd, so it was a big change in my life, and we focused everything on that, and I took a little bit of time off to help out and, as much as I could, and, everything's good now. Everything's great.
I mean, it was crazy because you would have sat back and watched some of the craziness unfold in the division. I mean, I don't know if anybody's really gotten a chance to get your thoughts on this, but what did you think about the whole Chad Mendes getting a shot against Conor McGregor? He had 2 weeks' notice. Conor McGregor was on one leg apparently with a torn ACL. The fight was crazy, back and forth. It looked like Chad was going to win, and McGregor beat him because got him with some body kicks. What did you think about that whole situation?
I thought it was a good fight. I thought Chad did deserve the opportunity. I would have liked to see him fight Conor McGregor on a full camp. But that's you have to take advantage of the opportunities you're given in the sport, and you take a chance doing that.
I'm just wondering, given that last fight to Chad was a loss, is there any way that you'd be looking to possibly get a rematch with Chad anytime soon? Or is that loss, is it a loss that you badly want to erase, or are you more focused on climbing the ladder and getting another title shot?
I'm open to anything. I'd love a rematch against any person who has beat me in the past. I believe that I'm one of the best fighters in the world, and I could beat anybody. So I would love to avenge every loss that I have.
It's an interesting one because obviously at the beginning of the fight with Chad, I believe you did have some success. If you did get a rematch with him, what would you do different? How would you think a rematch would go against Chad?
I think a rematch would go completely different. I rushed the exchange in the first fight. We both threw at the same time, and his connected first. And that's just, the chance you take when you're fighting and both guys are throwing at the same time. One guy's going to land, and, one guy's going to land first, and he did very well. And but I firmly believe that, I could come out victorious in that fight if we were to fight again.
You've got your big win over Diego, and that puts you at a short list of title contenders. Looking at the division for a second, everybody from number 8 downwards is booked in a fight already. The only people above you in the rankings are Frankie Edgar, Chad Mendes, Conor McGregor, and Aldo. Do you think that you'll likely be facing one of those 4 guys in your next fight? And I mean, I know you're not a guy who really picks fight, but is there anyone who stands out? Anyone that you go, you know what, I'd like to match up against that guy?
I'm not sure who my next fight is going to be. That's a definite possibility that they could pit me up with, one of the winners or one of the losers from those 4 fights. And, I'm just going to sit back and analyze these fights and watch them and enjoy the holidays with my family. And, that's it. As soon as the UFC calls me, I'll be ready to go.
It's interesting because you are in that position where you did get your win in and now you get the holidays. And in a lot of ways, you get to sit back and be entertained by these fights to see what happens with them. I want to get your prediction here because obviously everybody's talking about the Conor McGregor-Jose Aldo fight, but before we touch on that, who do you think is going to win in this Chad Mendes-Frankie Edgar fight? Because that one is super tough to predict.
It is very tough. I don't know if I could really pick a winner, but I would say that the longer the fight goes, I would put it in Frankie Edgar's favor because he's just a lot busier of a fighter. He's always scoring points. He's always moving, and he's always on the offensive. But, you know, with the punching power, I would have to give it to Chad Mendes. So it's one of those fights that, you know, the person who puts in more work is going to take the win, and the person who throws first and the person who throws the most is taking that fight.
You say throws first and throws the most. You know, obviously that's more the striking. You're a fantastic wrestler. I just want to get your perspective. Do you think the wrestling will cancel itself out? Because that's what a lot of people are saying. These guys are great wrestlers. There won't be much wrestling in this fight. What do you think?
You know, I think both guys do a great job of mixing up their wrestling. I think Frankie Edgar disguises his shots and takedowns a little better than Chad Mendes does. So Frankie, you know, he's got those tricky takedowns where it looks like he's coming in striking and he'll catch you off balance and get you with the knee pick. So I don't think that they're going to shy away from the wrestling. I think they both do a good job of mixing up their especially Frankie, mixing up his striking with his wrestling. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of grappling in this fight.
You, Chad, Frankie, as well as others, has already faced Aldo before. If Conor McGregor beats him, do you think it opens up the division? Because then all those matchups and more become fresh again.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think it would definitely open up the division, and we'll just have to sit back and see what happens on December 12th.
Be honest, is there part of you hoping that Conor beats Aldo so that you're more likely to get that title shot?
No, I'm not cheering for McGregor at all in this fight. I think Aldo has more weapons in his arsenal, and I think he's going to take the fight.
But in saying that, like, you've already faced Jose Aldo, it's always tough to sort of market a rematch with someone that you've already faced before. If McGregor beats him, it's almost easy to market that because you and McGregor, you've gone back and forth a little bit. There's no part of you that's like, man, I hope McGregor wins just so that I could possibly, you know, get slotted in there?
No, you know, I think a fight with me and McGregor, if he stays in the featherweight division, I think that fight is bound to happen. So whether he wins or loses, I think it'll happen sooner or later.
A lot of people are giving McGregor this fight, and obviously because of the dominant performances he's had, the fact that he's been such a great trash talker. In your opinion, how close will this fight be? Is it still going to be a blow-away to Aldo, or are you actually giving McGregor a chance in this fight?
Everybody has a chance in any fight. And I think it really depends on how Aldo is going into this fight mentally. It depends on if McGregor's gotten inside his head and if Aldo, you know, fights with emotion or not. Because if he starts fighting with anger, he's going to make mistakes, and that's exactly what McGregor wants. So it really depends on how smart Aldo is and how smart he fights.
We were watching some of the embeddeds recently. Actually, someone's kind enough to put through a compilation of all the moments between McGregor and Aldo. What do you think? Do you think McGregor has gotten into Aldo's head?
You know, from some of the videos that I've seen, it does look like he's frustrated him a little bit. But we'll see what happens.
Now, obviously, people know you somewhat campaigned for a fight with Conor when you made some funny parody videos about him in the past. Do you think you'll make some more in the future to possibly pursue the UFC to book that fight? And would you make any about Jose Aldo? Or are these parody videos exclusively to Conor McGregor? Set the record for us, Ricardo.
The parody video was exclusively for McGregor because, you know, he was just talking a lot of shit. He was talking a lot of shit about me and other people in the division. So I wanted to put something out there. And that's, when I see that guy, that's what I see. You know, that character that I did, like that's how I see him in my eyes. You know, I know it's a lot of the stuff that he says is a show for the cameras and just kind of fake. So to me, it's like a funny character like that when I see him talk. So that had to go out there, and you know, it was fun to do it. And would I do another one? If I could make it as funny as the first one, I would. And you know, we'll see.
But as far as Jose Aldo, you wouldn't do any parody videos like that just because of, I guess, he conducts himself differently?
I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed to doing any parody videos, you know, of anybody as long as they're. I could do a parody video of Aldo and have it be tasteful and funny, and he'd probably think it's funny too, you know. And I think that'd be fine.
This is something to think about. Yeah.
I feel like you missed the boat with Diego Sanchez, Ricardo. I have to be honest with you.
There
could have been a lot of parody videos made. But on that note, we're going to jump over to the tap out round and finish out the interview. As you know, tap out round, fun questions, word association, first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready, Ricardo?
I'm ready.
All right. We saw you gave Abel a driving lesson on Instagram. Be honest with us. What were the casualties?
No casualties. The car was in park the whole time.
Okay, good. And Abel is Ricardo's son, for those guys just wondering. Give us a crazy Mexico story from your latest trip down there with your fight with Diego Sanchez.
Crazy Mexico story. My dad is like very old school, very, he doesn't drink. He doesn't like drinking at all, anything like that. So after the fight, we all wanted to go out and party, and my dad was like following us around like a stalker the whole time, like making sure that we weren't drinking. And eventually we gave up and like went and got tacos at 3 a.m. and then went to bed.
It was like Denzel Washington in A Man on Fire, making sure nothing happens to you. Now, Ricardo, tell us, who's Thor and what exactly did he do to you in Sturgis?
Oh, Thor is the guy that works for Harley Davidson. And he was just my contact down there. He was just a real cool guy. He took me out. We had some drinks and stuff like that, and just a great guy. And then he put me in a chokehold at the end. The guy's fucking hands are like bear claws. He's gigantic. That's why I call him Thor, I guess.
So Thor's not actually his name. That's just a nickname because he's a massive dude.
Yeah, that's his nickname that he's had since high school, and he's just massive.
Any chance, Ricardo, you'll wear your 4th of July outfit to the Octagon one day?
There's always a chance, man. Always.
Ricardo, will mullets ever make a comeback? And do you think it's because people enjoy business in the front and party in the back?
I sure as hell hope so. I used to have a mean mullet back in the 90s when I was a kid, so I'd love to bring that sucker back.
Yeah, I think you need to bring it back, if only for one fight, Ricardo. Now, will Ricardo Lamas be dressed as Santa Claus this Christmas?
I did it last year, so I'm thinking I'm going to do it again this year for the kids.
Do you think there's anything creepy about a guy with a beard sliding down people's chimneys and eating cookies, drinking milk, and leaving presents?
With a beard, no. If it were a mustache, I think that's very creepy, but a beard makes it kind of okay.
Yeah, that's true. If you have a mustache like that, it means you're a porno guy, nothing else. Is someone laughing in the back, Ricardo? Do you have company listening to this?
No.
Yep, Ricardo, you there? Cut out for a second.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Finally, if the UFC could give you one matchup as a Christmas present, who would it be and why, Ricardo? Who are you hoping for?
The winner of the fight on December 12th.
And let's do one. Let's do one for fun's sake. If it could be any person from any division, a dream matchup, and you could be in any weight class, who would it be? You can go for anyone in any company.
I'd have to go for the guy that started the whole thing, Royce Gracie.
Well, he's fighting Ken Shamrock, so let me quickly get your thoughts on that. Who do you think is going to win in the Ken Shamrock-Royce Gracie fight?
Whoever doesn't have a heart attack halfway through the fight. It's gonna be an interesting one to watch.
There you go. You heard it there from Ricardo Lamas. Well, can't wait to see who you get matched up against. Ricardo, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. And don't forget to follow Ricardo Lamas on Twitter at Ricardo Lamas MMA.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben, and you're listening to Submission Radio. They're fucking rad.
He's worked with such athletes as Johnny Hendricks, Vito Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Jake Ellenberger, Michael Bisping, and was most recently in Melbourne to help Ronda Rousey for a UFC 193 fight. It's a pleasure to welcome Mike Dolce to Submission Radio. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you, guys. Big fan of the show. So happy to be here.
Hey, we're fans of your work, so it's great to finally have you on. Obviously, you were here in the country for UFC 193. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but just give us your opening thoughts. What did you think of your time, or what did you think of Melbourne in general?
This was my 5th time in Australia, actually, and my first time in Melbourne. And I got to tell you, it reminded me a lot of New York City in a good way. Being from New Jersey here, east coast of the United States, I have an affinity for more of the blue-collar cities. And Melbourne, great people, amazing coffee. It was nice to just have a nice walk around the city every day and just kind of breathe the air and interact. You guys treated us extremely well out there.
Let us know, because we've sort of, here in Melbourne, it's almost like an ongoing joke where there's a cafe for every single resident here, or every person in the country. How good is the coffee compared to other places like in say the States?
I think in general, the coffee was good everywhere I went to in Melbourne. Now, in the States, you can get excellent coffee also, but not everywhere. Everywhere I went, in Melbourne, I got an amazing cup of coffee. The barista knew exactly where the beans came from, what temperature they should be prepared at, all the specialty drinks. So it was really a nice experience. And it's a coffee culture. You look around the cafes, everybody's in there sipping on their flat whites and, all the other little things that we were learning as we were there.
Yeah, it's definitely entrenched in the Melbourne culture here. Now, speaking of the country, Mike, it's a beautiful country and we love it, but there's a real problem with obesity here in Australia. Now, a recent study by Lancet showed that over a quarter of the country's children and 63% of the adult population is overweight. In another study, it was forecast that if the current upward trends in overweight obesity continue, there will be approximately 1.75 million deaths at the age of 20 plus. Each Australian aged between 20 and 74 who dies from obesity in 2011 to 2050 will lose on average 12 years of life before the age of 75. Let me ask you, what are your thoughts on these shocking statistics?
We've been wrapped around these statistics now for the past decade or so inside my business, and longevity is the foundation of the Dolce Diet program. Most people don't realize that because we work with so many high-level athletes. They associate us with sports performance. Well, that's quite the opposite, really, of who we are as a brand. Our core culture is wrapped around longevity science. When we work with a Ronda Rousey or a Carlos Condit, our goal is for them to be 120 years old, showing their great-grandchildren photos of when they won the UFC world title, in their late 20s, early 30s and such. So we kind of use the short-term sports performance and the physical cosmetic aspect of healthy eating as the Trojan horse to really change the lifestyle and the habits of our clients. We also use the platform afforded to us from the association with these athletes to speak about the importance of proper nutrition, of eating real food or what we call earth-grown nutrients, of avoiding all the processed food-like products out there, and I won't even call these things food, to avoid the external influences that really have a serious damage on our health and wellness. And the stats that you're telling me right now are very similar to those of us here in the United States. I think we always kind of battle for who's worst, who's more obese, who's going to die earliest. Here in the United States, 2 out of 3 Americans will die of a lifestyle-related illness, as says the Center for Disease Control. Now, that stat is staggering, because not too long ago, a little over a decade ago, that number was, quote, only 1 out of 2 people. So our death rate is exponentially increasing. But so is the profit line of pharmaceutical companies, medical and health profession, the supplement industry. So all these companies and industries that are supposed to be supporting our health are actually making massive profit while the average citizen is dying at an alarming rate. This is scary stuff.
Well, explain this to us, because I don't understand. I mean, me and Casper have spoken about this before. Why are the statistics going up? Why is it now in 2015 it's getting worse and worse? What was it from the 90s and the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s that made it a little bit less? And why is it increasing more and more? Is it to do with the food? Is it to do with the lack of exercise? What's going on, Mike?
I believe it's all of the above. It's the changing of the culture. Part of it is the instant gratification. You can just drive into a McDonald's really in any first world country, and you can get a made to serve dinner. You can get a Big Mac, French fries, chicken nuggets, big old soda, shake on the side, little apple pie dessert for under $10 or so. You can feed your family and drive away. Well, in this day and age, those food-like products are not being produced with your health in mind. Those food products are being produced with a profit and loss statement in mind, and people's jobs and investors' greed is really the reason why these foods are positioned the way that they are, and why these products are marketed the way they are. On my Instagram account, I just posted a photo of Kellogg's. Their new marketing campaign is on a box of Frosted Flakes, where now they're saying Frosted Flakes now come with, quote, energy clusters.
So sugar?
Well, what are these energy clusters? It's simply sugar. They also promote the fact that each each serving of Frosted Flakes has 9 grams of protein when added with a cup of skim milk. So 5 grams of protein from the Frosted Flakes, 4 grams of protein from the skim milk. They do not promote the fact that you're getting nearly 60 grams of carbohydrate per same serving and almost 30 grams of sugar per same serving with 1 gram of fiber, which is absolutely ridiculous. So they're really trying to manipulate the public. They're manipulating the media. They're manipulating the marketing to try and trick families into believing that these food-like products are healthy and should be given to children. Now we take it a step further. Parents in the 20, 30, 40-year-old age group are now feeding their children these food-like products that have a nasty and negative health effect, which you can see as your stat reports that nearly a quarter of the children now are considered obese. Very similar stat over here in the United States. Also, there are more children now being diagnosed with diabetes here in the United States than at any other time in recorded history. Well, why is that? These are lifestyle-related decisions. These are lifestyle-related diseases that are basically a choice. Now, what we're doing here at the Dolce Diet this year, we've actually applied for, and we're starting a nonprofit organization that is dedicated at educating the public on childhood obesity and eating disorders. It's because of this and these situations. I'm so happy you guys even brought this up. That's why we're not changing our brand, but we're really redirecting a lot of our focus to start educating the community on proper eating habits because, let's face it, those in the 35 to 55-year-old demographic, it's almost too late for them in a way to make a meaningful change. Now, I'm not saying it's too late, but really what we're imploring them to do is start teaching downstream. Start feeding your children real food. Start teaching them the importance of making real food with homemade ingredients. Now, I'll end on this point. Parents should not be rewarding their son or daughter for coming home with an A+ on their report card or hitting the game-winning home run. They should not reward them by poisoning them with a trip to McDonald's or a candy bar or any sort of fast food, fried food, processed poison. They should not be doing that because what does that do? It sets a template in that young child's mind of how to reward themselves, what the reward system is. And soon they'll start abusing that and they'll start abusing their body, deteriorating their health. And as these stats point to right now, they will die younger. What I say is a terrible, horrible death.
No, those are very, very interesting points. We should probably all go by my dad's way of thinking, which is hard work should only be rewarded with more hard work, unfortunately. But
I love your dad.
In all seriousness, there's a real stigma, Mike, attached with being out of shape or fat. You know, a lot of obesity is caused by bad diet and a lack of exercise. However, many people battling obesity, they may have some sort of predisposition or a number of various mental health issues, which makes weight loss not so simple. What do you think about this sort of biggest loser, you're only fat because you're lazy thought process that's, possessed by large numbers of people in society these days?
Well, it's all about progress and it's about goal setting. Where are you going? Are you making the right decisions today? I like to keep it very clear, very black and white. The next decision you make will take you one step closer or farther from your goal. Now, in our practice, I have a team of dietitians sitting in my office right now. Every day we deal with the general public, people from our local community or abroad contacting us via online and Skype just like this, and we have consultations with them. And so many people come to us with so many excuses as to why they're overweight, as to why they're unhealthy, as to why they're dealing with all these problems. They do not present solutions. They really want us, they know that they need help, but they don't want to admit that it's their fault. Now, you could have some sort of genetic issue that makes it harder to lose weight, but that percentage of the population is infinitely minuscule as compared to those that it's truly a decision, that it's truly as a lack of discipline or dedication or goal setting. It's just simple apathy of their own to allow themselves to be healthy and live the life that they truly deserve. So really, as human beings, we are completely alone on this planet. We are stuck inside our, the sheath of skin and hair that we have on our body. At the end of the day, inside, we are completely alone. Nobody can do this for you. Now, we can be motivated and inspired by the people around us, but nobody can make you eat well. Nobody can make you exercise. Nobody can make you rest properly or manage your levels of stress. You must do that for yourself, and that's what we ask our clients to do. Now, we'll hand them the treasure map on how that has to be done, but we cannot push them. We cannot force them. They must take each step on their own. We will be with them and walk by their side, but again, we cannot do that for them. So everyone out there who makes an excuse as to why they're stuck in the position that they're in, they have to start to move now. Now, you're not going to lose 100 pounds in a day. We shoot for 1 pound at a time. Let's aim for 1 pound this week, and we do that by breaking this up into action steps, by doing everything we can today to achieve that one goal at the end of the week, and then 2 weeks, and then the month, and then a year, and we go on from there.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, Mike, and just go into a scenario. For example, I'm a middle-aged mom. I'm a bit bigger, and I'm busy with work, and I go to the pool, for example, and people are laughing at me because I'm overweight. People are telling me that I'm fat, that I need to lose weight, and instead of doing what I need to do, all this creates some kind of mental issue for me where I don't eat well. Maybe I don't eat at all. I start throwing up my food. Maybe it starts an issue with food, like a bulimia or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of listeners out there who are going through that because the statistics are huge between males and females who deal with bullying and also negative comments that don't lead to them eating healthier or exercising more, but doing these drastic things that really take a toll on their life. Give them some advice. How do you get out of that rut, and how do you get on the right track? Because that's something that a lot of people deal with these days.
And we do, in our practice, we do deal with young men and women who have eating disorders. And that is a very difficult issue for them to deal with, for their family to deal with. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what the cause is and what the true remedy is. What we do is we actually try and sit with the individual, the human, and we get to know them and we get to understand what their goal set is, what their challenges are, and what they want out of life. And we ask them to find a point of motivation and focus on that point of motivation. And that could be a lot of people, they just truly, one of the biggest things that we get, people want to be around for their children as they get older. They realize at some point in their 30s, 40s, maybe knocking on 50, holy crap, I got a 8, 10, 15-year-old kid at home. I want to see them graduate high school. I want to see them get married and have kids. That helps a lot of people. The vanity really doesn't motivate a lot of people. I want to have abs. I want to fit in that bikini. That's more of a short term, but that's not really a good anchor for people to hang on. So for the people out there that have some sort of issue that they're battling, we ask, number one, is to find that point of motivation. What truly do they want? Do they need? Are they hoping, looking, wanting in life? And let's focus on that. And the next thing we need to do is find a support system. Who around you will actually care enough to make that walk with you? Who cares enough to give you the tough love and tell you when you're screwing up, or give you a big hug when you do something well? And there's a mix of that along the way. Now, my team, we're very well educated and experienced in these situations, and we're happy to be a part of that. But there needs to be closer individuals also. Now, some people, unfortunately, they have the opposite, what we call crabs in the pot. People around them that are just dragging them down, trying to tell them that they're never going to be good. It could be, an insecure spouse, an over burdensome parent, all these, people in their life that are just kind of that excess dead weight. And we're able to identify those people and use them as motivation to move our clients forward. So I'm not going to try and diagnose eating disorders on air right now. That would certainly, not be correct protocol. Mm-hmm. But for anyone listening, you need to find motivation, because otherwise you will die. You will die an early, terrible death. Your life will not be fulfilling. You will be a burden on people around you, and that's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. We can all think about in our own families the uncle or the grandparent or the step-parent that had some sort of issue or illness that they just kind of dragged into their later years, and then for the next 10, 15, 20 years sometimes, they're kind of stuck in their bedroom sitting on their couch, where their extended family is now taking care of them. They can't travel to where they want to go because they have to take care of Uncle so-and-so. They can't send the kid to college because a lot of that money was expended taking care of so-and-so. Now, I'm not showing blame. I'm trying to offer points of motivation for people that are listening. Again, we are completely alone and completely responsible for our own success or our own failures. And once people become accountable to that, they start to make a change. And we try and scale this very small. We ask, just do one more thing today better than you did yesterday. Do not recreate the wheel. We're just looking for daily progress each and every day with consistency, and that will build that bridge from where you are now to where you want to be.
I like that. I like how you use the crabs in the pot, the people that are sort of dead weight and negative. I like that you use them as motivation. If it was me and Dennis, we'd probably just ship them off to an island or something like that and eliminate them from the people's lives. But a lot of what you said before about discipline and I guess, bad habits sort of tie into the next subject. We want to ask you about this, Mike. One of your former clients in Johnny Hendricks had a big issue with his weight for his last fight against Tyron Woodley. I imagine you wouldn't have been too sort of close to the source, and I don't think you were working with Johnny, but, what exactly went wrong from your sort of outside perspective?
I was not working with Johnny, though I do care about him as a person. I think he's a great guy. I consider myself still a friend of Johnny's. And I am friends with his coaching staff, or his former coaching staff, one of which is Adrian Ramirez. Adrian recently, he went on the record, I believe, with MMA Junkie, and he kind of added some insight behind the camp that essentially was they got some bad information from another, diet coach or pseudo-nutritionist out there that really knocked Johnny's progress off the rails. They said he was making great progress, started listening to some new guy that wanted to offer advice. All of a sudden, Johnny started gaining weight. He looked terrible in training. That went on for a few weeks, and they tried to get it back together. And, it didn't quite happen. So that's kind of the story I got, behind the scenes from Adrian, some of the stuff that he had said publicly. I don't think it's appropriate for me to really comment on private conversations to get down into detail unless Johnny or Adrian, kind of comes out. But unfortunately with Johnny, he's so talented and he's so goddamn tough, as we've seen in all of his fights. I mean, I think 90% of the world believes Johnny actually won that second fight with Robbie Lawler. I think Robbie Lawler is just an amazing champion. But if you watch that fight and if you score that fight, I mean, Johnny does pretty damn well in that fight. And he was not in the best shape. He said himself, again, not disclosing private information, he was extremely heavy before that fight. I think 218 pounds, came in the camp at 211 pounds for that Robbie 2 fight. We're talking 41 pounds this young man. And, I say young man kind of loosely because he's in his early 30s now. That's a lot of weight for a man to have to lose during training camp and do it in a healthy manner and then go and fight a 5-round fight versus a guy like Robbie. So what happened in the Woodley fight, I think it's some of those old habits really chased him around and he wasn't able to shake them. And that's kind of what brought down the house, as they say, at the end of it. And it was unfortunate because as a fan, I was very excited to watch him go out there and face Woodley. I think that was a great contender fight.
Just quickly on Johnny before we move on, what do you think? Because a lot of people are saying he's better suited for middleweight, that he might not be able to make another cut down to welterweight, that it might be too dangerous for him. From working with him before, do you think he should stay in welterweight, or do you think a move up to middleweight might be good for him?
My personal thought would be for Johnny to take at least 6 months out of competition and work on his lifestyle. I think if he can take a good 6-month run, redevelop the proper healthy eating habits and rest, recuperation, stress management that he would need to be healthy, I think he'd be an amazing welterweight based upon his structure, his height, his bone density, his limb length, the amount of muscle mass he has on his frame. He's the perfect sized welterweight. He just needs to bring down his overall body weight down. I don't believe he has a proportionate ratio of lean muscle mass to non-functional body weight. And if he's able to reduce that non-functional body weight down to, 10, 12% in the offseason and get into that single digit percentage for fight time, I think Johnny Hendricks could be unstoppable in the weight class.
I want to switch topics, Mike. Lou Giordano, who's another weight management specialist, made some comments, I believe a few weeks ago, and he claimed, one of the things that he claimed is that he basically said that you're a fraud. He said, if I ever charge a client $1,000 a day and they never felt worse, I probably should look for a new profession. Just curious, what do you make of these comments?
It's so funny to see all these pseudo nutritionists and dietitians come out of the woodwork and mention my name or that of the Dolce diet because they're completely irrelevant. in the industry. Nobody writes an article about them unless they mention the Dolce diet. That's their only way to get noticed. So, and this happens to us every day. I have no opinion. I think it's, I know what my team does. Now, mind you, I have a team of registered dietitians on staff in my office. Every meal plan that my team writes is completely vetted by licensed dietitians. Here in the majority of states inside the United States, it is illegal for any individual to prescribe nutrition advice to another human being unless they are licensed by the state and a registered dietitian. So I would certainly put it out there that any athlete listening to someone that is unlicensed, it is like hiring an unlicensed contractor to build a deck on your house. Why would you risk your health in such a situation? Especially, why would you risk your health to someone that's looking for simple clickbait and offering free services? How can you be a professional if you're working for free? Again, I would be very suspicious of individuals like that. And if they are not a registered dietitian, if it's not a team of registered dietitians, I would steer clear of those snake oil salesmen. It's a scary product. Why would you risk your health and your longevity and your career in the hands of an amateur?
Yeah, well, just quickly on Lou, one last question. He also said, I'm pretty sure because of how adamant he was about the IV ban, but most of his clients have used an IV. It's obvious Dolce promotes extreme weight cutting. Just wondering, Mike, what do you think of those comments? Do you promote extreme weight cutting?
Absolutely not. Now, if anyone who follows the Dolce diet knows it is a lifestyle-based approach to health and wellness. We suggest our athletes start cutting weight 52 weeks before competition, what we call a slow burn. Our athletes have a ceiling of 12% body fat in the offseason. Now, you can look at Thiago Alves, who now walks around so light, he wants to drop to lightweight. He was one of the biggest welterweights in the world. On the Dolce diet, he's now one of the lightest. You look at Mirsad Bektic, who is a rising star inside the UFC, who walks around very close to his competition weight, makes weight. And now Thiago and Mirsad, I must say, they both make weight the night before weigh-ins. They have dinner that night. They have breakfast that morning. They step on the scale without sweating or dripping a single ounce. You can look at Ronda Rousey, never used an IV in her entire competitive career. Manny Gambrian, who fought at 170 pounds, then 155, fought Jose Aldo for the WEC world title at 145. And then now he's fighting at 135 pounds on the Dolce diet, only cuts 2 pounds the day of competition, or Stephen Ray over in the UK. Another Dolce diet subject, 3-0 inside the UFC, no IV needed when he fought over there in Scotland recently, made weight perfectly, and looked dominant in his fight. So we can talk about this on and on. Unfortunately, you get people out there that they're just simply looking for clickbait. They're finding reasons to mention the Dolce diet to get some sort of notoriety for their little, possibility of fame inside the industry. And again, it's sad. You never hear me say anything bad about anybody. Have you? That's not the way we promote. Now, again, we only work with 8 athletes per year because we don't dilute our services. We make sure that each one of our athletes has all the attention that they need. And a lot of the other pseudo coaches out there, they're just throwing shit against the wall. They're just trying to, a lot of these guys, unfortunately, they get paid in tweets. That is not a professional, ladies and gentlemen. That's scary. Now, you can walk into my office any day and you can sit down with one of my registered dietitians and you can determine whether or not what we do is legitimate, and absolutely you will. Now, our lead dietitian, I'll go further, Samantha Coogan, has her Master's of Science in Exercise Physiology, a registered dietitian, and she also teaches nutrition at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Who has a more credentialed team than the Dolce diet? I challenge anybody to find someone more credentialed than my team.
Samantha Coogan getting it done. Now, Mike, we had a chat with Gunnar Nelson a few weeks ago, and he thinks the weighing system is flawed and shouldn't give fighters an opportunity to make these massive weight cuts. I understand, obviously, with the Dolce diet, guys aren't necessarily cutting all that much, but you do get other fighters cutting, say, 20, 30 pounds, and I guess his whole point was about by the time fight night comes, you can have a welterweight, instead of fighting 170, they may be fighting at, 185 or 200. If the weigh-ins were on the day or after the fight, fighters would have no choice but to fight near their natural weights. What do you think about this concept?
In a perfect world, that would be true. And I had a great conversation with Jeff Nowitzki while in Melbourne. We had multiple conversations on this issue, trying to understand what's the best possible outcome for fighter health and safety. Would it be a day of weigh-ins? Now let's think about this. You look at NCAA wrestling. How healthy are these guys when they compete day of weigh-ins? Not at all. They're cutting weight all the way up until that morning, completely dehydrated. And the only saving factor is the guy staring at them on the other side of the mat did the same damn thing. When you throw tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into the pot, these athletes will take unnecessary risks to gain an advantage. This is human nature. So let's talk about the world as it really is, not as how we wish it should be. Now, that's a tough subject. Should you do hydration testing? Any high school wrestler right now can cheat a hydration test easily. They have the IP, the understanding to do that. They're learning from their college coaches how to cheat a hydration test. So hydration testing and weight certification, well, that doesn't really matter. The day of weigh-in, does that help? Yeah, it is a little bit better, but we know the fluid sac around the brain will not completely restore itself within 24 hours. So this is one of the conversations Jeff and I had. So fighter safety is definitely at a risk, even with a 24-hour weigh-in. So what's the best? Now what's the next best method? It could be a 48-hour weigh-in if we're only concerned about the health and safety of the athlete. Does that allow for unfair advantages if one athlete's cutting 20 or 30 pounds and another athlete who's only cutting 10 pounds? That's very possible. So there's many aspects of this one conversation. Now, I am not the man to tell you exactly how it should be done, but I do believe, based upon our experience and our knowledge of the science, that we should have a voice in this conversation. So the conversation with Jeff and myself is continuing. He's speaking with Andy Foster at length here recently. I know all the heads of the major commissions are allowing it, but what we also need to remember is that the IV ban was not as a result of weight cutting, which is legally sanctioned by every major athletic commission. The IV ban only came into effect as a deterrent for performance-enhancing drugs. And a lot of times people make the correlation between the IV ban and weight cutting, but that's not the case. It was only brought in to diffuse the PED situation, which is excellent, but it created a much bigger monster as a result of the weight cuts. So more people need to get involved in this conversation. I believe they need to have neurologists involved in this conversation to really determine the long-term effects of traumatic brain injury in a dehydrated athlete. That's the biggest concern that we have as we look at all the data. What will happen to the athlete that gets kicked in the skull 24 minutes into a 25-minute fight after being just 3% dehydrated? Now, 3% dehydration on a 200-pound athlete is only 6 pounds. All of the credible data shows extreme negative side effects of just a 3% level of dehydration. So this would not be considered extreme weight cutting.
Wow.
Now, this isn't part of the conversation, but it should be. And this is what my team does every day. Every day we spend time going through all the literature out there, trying to come up with the answer. We're still looking for it.
Wow, that's some crazy stuff, Mike. Some insight brought into the interview. Let me switch topics to UFC 193 quickly, and let's talk about Ronda Rousey. Prior to her fight, UFC 193 at the weigh-in, some media members and fans thought she looked a little bit out of shape. Obviously, you were working very closely with her. What did you make of those comments?
It's so funny to hear people make comments when they're sitting outside looking through the lens of another individual, and they make comments about teams and camps and athletes and such. What they're not doing is not saying Holly Holm did an amazing job. I think that's the real story here. Holly Holm did an amazing job in that fight. She had a great team, a great game plan. She was well prepared for the version of Ronda Rousey that showed up to compete that night. Now, Ronda was in excellent shape. She had an amazing training camp. There were no discernible changes to her meal plan or her weight cut. She was actually 2 pounds lighter this fight week than she was the fight week versus Bex Carrera. So you could pull back and look at the data points. The data points show that Ronda should have had a much better performance. But what the variable is Holly Holm. Holly Holm did a great job on that night. And It's unfortunate to see, but this is the current climate that we live in right now, nationally, globally, specifically within this little microcosm of mixed martial arts. People only look for negative. If it bleeds, it leads. And that story certainly sells, as we can see with all the clickbait headlines out there with very little actual context inside the article. So this is what people are trying to hang their hat on, but nobody's really talking about the great job that Holly did. Mm-hmm. Holly was 47-3 going into this fight with Ronda Rousey. She had 4 times the combat experience that Ronda Rousey had going into this fight. Nobody talked about that. Now, I actually did that in a video interview going back 8 to 10 weeks ago for MMA Junkie. And I said, Holly Holm is legit. She is real, and she's probably the toughest competitor Ronda ever faced for the exact same reasons that we saw. This lady knows how to control the distance. She's very accurate with her striking. She can win ugly or she can win pretty, but this girl knows how to win. 47 victories to only 3 defeats. That's a serious young lady right there, and she did a great job on that night.
For sure, and we've definitely talked at length in the past and after the fight about Holly Holm's amazing victory. Got to ask you, as a big part of the team, obviously Team Rousey, you're obviously close with Edmund. He's gotten a lot of flack for his game plan or lack thereof from a lot of people's perspective. And also his advice in between rounds 1 and 2 in the fight. Do you think Ronda's game plan for Holly Holm was flawed going into this fight? What did you make of the advice Eben offered her in between rounds? What's your take on it, Mike?
Unfortunately, I was cage side, so I didn't hear the communication in the corner. So I would have to actually go back and watch my DVR and hear exactly what was said. Now, game plan wise, I know Ronda was out there and she was clearly trying to outbox a boxer. Well, that's an uphill battle for sure. But we can see Ronda had the power to knock out Betch Carrera, who was also undefeated inside the UFC with some TKO finishes, primarily known as a striker. I think Holly Holm's level of striking, though, was far superior to that of Betch, and that might not have been taken into consideration moving forward. That might not have been properly vetted as part of the training camp, but who knows how that goes? I mean, like Mike Tyson says, every game plan goes out the window when you get punched in the face. I'm paraphrasing. And I believe that's a little part of what happened also. Once you step in there, that cage door shuts. All of a sudden, game plan is gone. Now you're in a fist fight. And Ronda was certainly in a fist fight that night with a great athlete.
A lot of people are sort of wondering if Ronda and Edmund are going to stick together after the whole strategy and the way things planned out. You obviously close to both of them. Do you think there's a chance that Ronda might switch camps for her next fight?
I can't speak on Ronda's behalf nor on Edmund's behalf with that. I know that they are very close as friends, also as coach and athlete. They have a great working relationship, what I've been blessed to be a part of for almost 3 years now. What I can say is Ronda was 12-0 going into that fight with Edmund on her coaching staff. And that needs to be considered also. She was 12-0, considered the most dominant athlete on the planet last year. And Edmund was part of that coaching staff. So again, we have to look at the whole picture and really appreciate the good work that they did alongside of the learning experiences that they had at UFC 193 in Melbourne. So I think that they're probably going to sit down in a private room over a cup of coffee and have a good conversation on what's best for Ronda as an athlete moving forward. And I will hear about that probably just before you guys do. I don't have any influence on that conversation, and I'm sure the right decision will be made.
Before we wrap up, just want to get a little bit of sort of insight. Bruce Buffer made some comments recently, Mike, that he believes Hollywood and Ronda Rousey's press obligations distracted Ronda from her training, and it was the ultimate cause of what happened. I mean, from everything that we've seen, she's been incredibly focused and hasn't really been an issue. What do you think about that? You mentioned a lot of people aren't giving Holly Holm enough credit, but do you think there's a part of, Ronda Rousey where her hectic schedule, I guess, took her attention away from, not to say the fight, but just, I guess, life in general?
I wouldn't be able to get inside her head and say definitively yes or no, but from an outside perspective, I do not know how she has been able to do so much for so long at such an elite level. Now, I'm with her every day, all day. At 5 a.m., we're awake. and there's someone knocking on her door for hair and makeup at 6:30 in the morning. We're in a vehicle traveling all over whatever the fight city is. She's doing phone interviews while she's in the car driving to do more interviews. And, when these interviews there, it's an all-day process. Now she has to mix in her training on top of that and all the fight PR. There is no athlete in the sport of MMA that has more media or has to perform more media than Ronda Rousey. So she's truly handicapped moving into any event because of her crazy, crazy schedule that none of her competitors have. Her competitors maybe have 20% of the media that Ronda has leading up to these fights. So is that a disadvantage for her? Absolutely. Does that have a negative effect on her? I could not honestly say because she's never communicated that. She seems to embrace it. Now, Ronda, during her open workout, she was there for an additional 2 hours when the cameras went off, signing every autograph and taking every photograph with every fan that wanted one. That's why the people love Ronda and why she's so popular. Now, me as a coach, I'm trying to pull her out of there saying, champ, let's go. You need to go home and rest. And she said, no, I got to sign these autographs. These people came all the way here to get an autograph, to get her photograph, and I'm not leaving until I do that for them. So that needs to be considered. God, this girl, she works so hard. And let's not forget, she's still a young lady. I mean, she's a 27-year-old girl that's dealing with all of this, all the chaos that's swirling around her right now, where 3, 4, 5 years ago, she wasn't. She was living in a car. So put yourself in that situation to really understand the life of Ronda Rousey and what she needs to deal with, and think, how well would you do in that situation? I know people that go to a 9-to-5 job and, they have to, drop their kid off at school before work and they get freaked out. It ruins the rest of their day because they're running behind schedule. Well, that's nothing compared to the life that this young lady has to live.
Yeah, Mike's not over-exaggerating. Me and Casper were there on hand for all her Melbourne stuff, and she hung around and signed a hell of a lot of autographs. It was very, very impressive. Finally, Mike, we're going to let you go on this question. It looks like there will be a rematch with Holm at UFC 200 in July. Let me ask you, can Ronda beat Holm and win her title back? And if so, how do you think she does it?
Absolutely. Ronda Rousey can beat any 135-pound female fighter on the planet. How does she do it? Who knows? Again, once that cage door shuts, then it becomes a fight. I think Ronda's bread and butter, of course, is inside the grappling range, although she has the power to knock anybody out at a moment's notice. Holly has shown to be an exceptional striker with a great game plan, great strategy, and gauge of distance. So this is a great fight. I think it's an amazing rematch moving forward. Of course, I predict Ronda will be dominant, and I think Ronda will be extremely dominant in a rematch, but she's going to have to work every single day of these next 6 months or so until she steps inside there.
Well, there you go, guys. Make sure to follow Mike Dolce on Twitter at The Dolce Diet. Find out more information about how you can start the Dolce Diet today at thedolcediet.com. Mike, we just want to say thank you so much for all the tremendous insight. It was great having you on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Smooth Benson Henderson. You're listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest will be fighting Frankie Saenz at UFC 194. The founder of Team Alpha Male holds the most finishes and submissions in the UFC Bantamweight division. The opposing coach from Conor McGregor on Tough 22, Urijah Faber. Welcome back to the program. How are you, man?
Doing good. How are you?
Very well now that you're on the program, Uriah. Now, we saw a very funny picture of what looked like Dana White in your office with the caption, "After weeks of back and forth banter, I've decided to fire Dana White and take over the UFC. Lorenzo Fertitta, what to do next?" Just wondering, how's your rule over the UFC been so far? Give us some ideas of what you've implemented since you've taken over with your evil reign.
Yeah, man, it's been good. First off, everyone in the UFC office is wearing bathing suits.
Love
men
it.
and women.
Mm-hmm.
And flip-flops at all times. And, no suits allowed unless you're going to court.
Yep.
And,
I was going to say, we can imagine certain people may not be happy about the flip-flops and bathing shorts.
Yeah, they got to give it a chance.
What about headbands? More headbands around the office.
Yeah, we do headbands. That'll work.
We were also going through your Twitter. We also saw a pic of you and Nate Diaz where you said, "We need our own talk show. Nate is the 209 Oprah, telling stories and dropping knowledge." This intrigued us. Tell us an example of some of these 209 Oprah stories.
Oh, man, dude. Nate is just, Nate and Nick have grown a lot. I've known those guys for a long time. They've just grown a lot as individuals and as fighters, but, like, as people. So he was just telling me how his interpretation of wealth when he was first in the Ultimate Fighter, he was just like, man, I didn't know anything. He's like, I had won, like, I can't remember if he said he won $12,000 or $9,000, and he thought he was rich. He was going to buy his mom a house. He was going to get himself a Cadillac and all this stuff. And we just told stories the whole way, man, about, like, just how much he's learned, when he was he's just an introspective guy, man. I mean, those guys get a bum rap because they haven't been the best, the best with dealing with media and dealing with authority and things like that. But they're really intelligent guys, and they just come from a different place. So we were just getting all sorts of stories, some that can be told, some that can't. And it was good. It was good for my boy Cody No Love, who is learning a lot and is a smart guy himself and kind of new in the game to hear some of Nate's stories.
I mean, Nate Diaz has obviously had some issues with the UFC. How's he doing? Is he feeling good about what's happening with him now? Obviously, he's got a fight coming up. Is he excited about it? I know he's had a lot of back and forth with the company so far.
Yeah, he's I think he's in a good place now. I think he kind of realized, like, he kind of sabotaged himself and was like, man, that didn't work out for me, and I need to fight, I need to win, and I need, he has his goals set. So I liked hearing him be introspective and see that, turning new leaves and just growing, because he's a young guy as far as experience goes in the fight game. He's kind of an older guy, but he's still a very young guy.
It's good to hear, because we can't wait to see him back in the octagon. Moving on to your fight, you'll be a part of the huge UFC 194 card featuring your opposing coach Conor McGregor. Your headline of the prelim card. We know you've spoken about the advantages of being on the prelims before. Obviously, a lot of eyeballs, the public, the cheapskates will watch it. But did any part of you want to make it out to the main card for this one?
A little bit, To be honest, though, I've kind of built that relationship with Fox Sports 1, always pumping up that I'm going to be, being that guy. This is going to be a big card, though, so I imagine my fight will probably be on the pay-per-view card anyways. Unless it's a really bad fight, then I wouldn't want more people to watch it. But when this happens, it usually goes as the main event on that Fox Sports 1, and then it gets rolled over and gets put into the main card. So it's kind of a win-win for me.
Does a part of you feel like, because they love putting you on there so much and you've expressed how well you do there, that in the future maybe they can put you back up on the main card, even though you do such a great job being on top of the prelim card? You wouldn't mind being back on the main card someday soon?
Oh, I will be, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But I'd like to be in the main card when it pays me to be in the main card. You know what I mean? Because there's a big misconception about how we get paid in here, and I get paid exactly the same whether I'm on the Fox Sports 1 card or the main event card. When I'm in the main event, that's when I'll get paid, and that's when I'd like to make a point to be there.
Gotcha. Because I know we've asked you before about pay-per-view points, and you sort of said, look, it doesn't affect me either way. Maybe that was because you weren't in the main event. And I wasn't going to bring this up till later on in the interview, but we were watching a video recently. You and Conor were sort of passionately discussing, I guess, business, and he was talking about numbers and money from pay-per-views, and you mentioned how you only just got your, I think, pay-per-view points from the time you fought Aldo in WEC, I think 48 or 49, and that was like 5.5 years ago, which I don't know whether that's just the standard, but I found it crazy. Is that sort of the standard? And are you still waiting on sort of, I guess, pay-per-view points from, like, older fights?
Well, don't exactly quote me on this, but this is my understanding of how things work, being a guy that's had pay-per-view before. And Conor's deal may be different. I've had quite a few conversations with Conor inside, off camera and on camera about, different business stuff. And the way pay-per-view works, if you get a piece of the pay-per-view, and people can sign away their rights to pay-per-view to take guaranteed money, most likely when you roll that dice, the UFC are very intelligent and they're probably going to get the upper hand on that. But for pay-per-view, it's like almost like Pepsi or Budweiser distribution. There's different people in different areas that have different rights to areas. So someone has the rights to be a distributor for Pepsi in Sacramento, in New York, in the small town of Humboldt, or whatever it is. It's individual rights to it, and it's the same way from what I understand with pay-per-view. So there's some big providers that maintain a lot of the pay-per-view. So you're basically talking about guys that have like a bigger region like New York, and they have, they get a piece. They're the pay-per-view provider, so they take their cut. But there's also the mom and pops and little towns and little cities all across the globe or wherever they do pay-per-view that have to tally their own results, and some take longer than others, et cetera, et cetera. So it's almost like it wasn't like I had just got my money from Jose Aldo. I had gotten one little check 5 years later.
Wow.
Meaning is accumulation. You get different amount. You get different amounts of money over different times because people are, there's different businesses. They're being run by different people and have different methods, etc. So some people take forever, So it's just an interesting thing, and I mean, people don't understand that it's like if you're not getting paid on a pay-per-view, and like for example, Ronda's recently become a big pay-per-view star, but 3 fights ago she was doing like 450,000 buys. On a free card on the Fox Sports 1 card, you're getting over 1 million people tuning in, and then a bunch of eyes that you wouldn't have got otherwise walking by the bar, et cetera, et cetera. And, they're building her as a star, which she is. But when it comes to pay-per-views, you're going to probably get less eyes. So, that's how I think about things. I myself am a brand. The pay stays the same. I want more eyes on me.
You're like Jerry Seinfeld getting random checks from Japan for years to come. Now, let's talk about your opponent, Frankie Saenz. He's on a 7-fight win streak. It's another case of a tough opponent, but not really someone who's known by fans. Are you happy with this matchup? Or with a massive card like this and you being on TV every week on Tough, were you hoping for a bigger name?
There was some names that not that much bigger. I mean, who are the biggest names in my division, in your opinion?
Well, you got Brian Caraway, you got Sterling, maybe Thomas Almeida, even though he fought recently.
Brian Caraway didn't accept the fight, and then So I mean, here's the truth. That's a big understatement that he's not very well known. Like no one knows who Frankie is. He's on a 7-fight win streak, but I think his one loss before that was a disqualification for him throwing a legal knee. Guy is very, very tough, and no one knew who TJ Dillashaw was either. So I'm taking this guy very serious, and approaching him as a top level competitor because he is. And I'm not necessarily pumped about how much notoriety he has, but that's his problem. I've got plenty for myself, and I plan on putting on a great fight and fighting tooth and nail, and I'm excited for the fights to come after that as well, but I got to win this one first.
Sorry to cut in, Casper, but you mentioned that Brian Caraway didn't take the fight. Do you have any information on why he chose not to take that fight? Because that seems like a no-brainer for him.
I don't know. I actually confronted him about it because I know Brian. He used to train with us, and I saw him at an event, and I was like, "Dude, we're supposed to throw down. We're going to be the main. We're actually going to be the main event where Chad and Frankie are the day before, right? That was supposed to be our fight." And then he said he had like a family reunion or something. So who knows?
Okay, gotcha. Going back to Frankie Saenz, like you mentioned, he's a veteran at 35 years old. He's won all but 2 of his 13 fights. One of them was a DQ. He's also known for being a very persistent and relentless wrestler with, good takedowns. However, you're one of the best wrestlers and submission grapplers in the division. Do you sort of see this as your fight to lose? You've kind of got, obviously, the experience. You've got some of the most finishes in Bantamweight history. Is this kind of like your fight to lose?
Well, I never go into anything thinking like that. I mean, every fight is for me a fight that I feel like, I should be winning. But that being said, he brings no matter what, this is the one thing I know about wrestling and the intensity that wrestling brings. This is going to be a very, very difficult fight just because I've seen the way he fights, and it's a wrestling grind mentality. Not necessarily just wrestling. He throws a lot of, knees and hands and kicks and things like that, but the pace and the mentality is the wrestling grind, which I understand. Guys like Lance Palmer understand. Chad Mendes understands. Frankie Edgar understands. Guys that have wrestled at a high level for a very long time understand. So that being said, I'm looking forward to a high-paced fight like that. But I do feel like, yeah, this is my fight to lose. I'd have to blow it because I feel like I'm the better martial artist for sure.
It's going to be great for the division, for the Bantamweight division. Speaking of the division, Jon Dodson, he'll be making his return to the Bantamweight division soon, it looks like, trying to hunt for TJ Dillashaw's title. Just wondering, would you be interested in possibly welcoming Dodson back to the division if everything goes to plan at UFC 194?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a couple fights I'm really looking forward to. I wasn't one I've even thought about, but sure. I have my eyes on, there's probably 3 big fights for me out there that I get excited about, and everything else is sure, okay, whatever.
Well, let's forget about that one then. Tell us about some of the fights that you're excited about, because from speaking to you in the past, we know that when you've got a fight come up and you've obviously got Frankie Saenz, you're only focusing on that one, but it's okay to sort of have a few sort of down the line. What are some of these other big fights that you sort of got your eye on?
Well, obviously, I'm back in the hunt for a belt. There's a friend and a foe that are about to do battle. TJ Dillashaw and Dominic Cruz. TJ being the friend and Dominic being the foe. On top of that, I could see myself going back up. This has been a process. I gained weight to go up and fight Frankie, and then the weight never came down, which I wasn't used to. I was walking around like 164, a little thicker than I normally would be. And so this has been a tough cut. And I'm going to see without IVs and things like that how the 35-pound weight class is going to do for me. But I could go back up to 45s, and there's super fights up there too, guys like Conor McGregor. So, those are 3 fights in itself. Cruz, TJ, and Conor that I think a lot of eyes would be on, and would also be fights that I could make some real money on, like we talked about before.
Let's just touch on that potential title hunt that you're in. Is it a case where you'd only take that fight if Dominic Cruz beats TJ Dillashaw, or are you guys at a point now where, even though you're friends, you're willing to put that aside to fight him if he does beat Dominic Cruz?
Yeah, if he's the champion, yeah. If that's what you're asking.
Well, because before, back in the day, when you were on our program, you said because he was a part of Team Alpha Male and you guys had a relationship, you weren't sure whether or not you'd fight TJ Dillashaw. Now, obviously, he's left the camp. So I'm just wondering if that means that you're more likely to fight him if you do get the opportunity now.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, what am I going to tell Zuffa? Hey, this guy used to be on my team, so I'm not gonna fight for the world championship. No, it's not gonna happen. No, of course. I guess it's been a long time since we did our interview, but yeah, no doubt. I'd be ready.
I know that, yeah, and that's the thing. Like for a long time, there was always that thing. I can't stress enough that you and TJ are still friends, but it was always a tough thing because on one hand you wanted that title belt, but if TJ was holding the belt, it was like, look, we're friends, we're teammates. It's not going to happen. Is there a sense of relief on your part now that TJ's sort of gone and done his own thing? You guys are no longer officially teammates. Is it almost a relief where you don't have to feel bad that you do want that title belt and you have no problems with fighting him now?
No, it's not relief. It's not the best feeling, to be honest. I mean, he and I aren't the best of friends like we were before, as you can imagine. I feel like he's kind of turned himself into a victim in this whole situation where, like, in his mind, I'm the bad guy because he's left our team. And I told him, all right, well, if you're not on our team, you can't be coming in here and training with us, So he feels that I kicked him out of the gym, he said in an interview or something like that, which is kind of comical, as the fact that he actually moved to different state and claimed a different team and told me that he was no longer going to be with our team. But so I think that he's a little shaken up about it. And you know what, man? This is a sport where we are competitors. I've actually fought friends of mine like Scotty Jorgensen and Brian Bowles and Charlie Valencia. These are all guys that have been friends of mine. And you know, the whole thing with TJ was just kind of, I mean, it's not something I'm happy about, you know, but this is the truth.
A lot of people think that the whole TJ Dillashaw thing coincided with some of the comments that you made about Dwayne Ludwig. I'm just wondering, was there any relation between those comments and him making the move there, not being able to train with you guys anymore? Did that play into it at all?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think he actually went and joined a different team, Team Elevation, and Dwayne's not the head coach there. He's got his own gym far away. I mean, maybe, you know, what you don't want to do is have a guy that's trying to actively ruin your team be closely allied with somebody who's on your team. So when he cut ties, then of course you play that factor into it. But I mean, whatever on that case, it is what it is.
Sure. Let's go back to the Ultimate Fighter for a second, because I feel like the TJ Dillashaw thing's sort of been done for a bit. The show's almost over. Rate the experience for us compared to the tough that you did with Dominic Cruz. Which one have you enjoyed more? What are the biggest differences?
It's ironic because I actually enjoyed this one more. I had a lot more fun with it, and I feel like I have my work cut out for me a little bit. I mean, the difference last time was that we had double the time to work with these guys, and we got to pick our own team. So you got to analyze the guys, you know, look at their records, who had padded records, who had real competition, who had, you know, were high level in other areas, and then you got to watch them fight, and then you got to pick them, and then you had 3 months to develop these guys. This time around, it was like the producers or the matchmakers, whoever, was like, all right, guys, here's your team, Urijah, and here's your team, Conor, and these guys will be fighting every 3 days. So it was just a different experience altogether. And that being said, I was happy with my guys' mentalities. I felt like they could have been a little more experienced coming in. I know that we had 7 guys from our team that tried out that didn't make the show that I thought would have done really well on the show, and you know, I enjoyed the process. It was fun having back and forth banter with McGregor, because McGregor, although he can be irritating sometimes, has a lot of personality, and Cruz is just kind of a bitter dude who's a dud, and so that made for a lot more fun. And you know, other than my guys not getting as many W's as I would have liked, I feel like it was a good experience all the way around.
Now, Uriah, before we jump to the tap-out round and finish off the interview, we just noticed that you recently Instagrammed a picture of the boys at Team Alpha Male wearing different types of talk gear, and you wrote that you miss seeing talk worn in the octagon. Just wondering, how hard has it been to make that adjustment for you from seeing talk worn by athletes such as Jon Jones and many other top fighters to not seeing it worn in the octagon at all?
It's a bit unfortunate. You know, I mean, part of this sport is, you know, the individuality. One of the things that makes it stand out is you have characters like Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor and myself that have our own styles and personalities and things that make us us. So as far as what goes into being an individual, I like to see some variety. I mean, I don't dislike the Reebok stuff. I just like my stuff better, and I'd you know, just miss it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lifestyle brand, so it's still there. But I mean, everybody looks the same right now with the outfits.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you're right. We're gonna wrap up the.
You know, variety is the spice of life.
Well, you know, we've heard it referenced to, it's almost like with NASCAR, where everybody looks different, every car looks different, and now, you know, all the cars or all the fighters kind of look the same. So, you know, there's a side to each story. We're going to wrap up the interview with the Submission Radio Tap-Out round. We ask you a whole bunch of fun questions. You answer with the first thing that comes to mind. Are you ready, Urijah?
I am ready.
When are we going to see Jon Jones teaching Urijah Faber how to Dougie Part 2?
I don't think either of us knew how to Dougie very well.
No.
I mean, I certainly don't know how, and I don't think he did either. But I get down there and dance with the champ again, Johnny Bones. Now, he's back, isn't he?
He is back, yeah. And you mentioned him as the champion, but he doesn't have the belt. Are you saying that you still believe he is the champion?
Yeah, he's the champion. Cormier is a champion also. Both those guys are champions. We're going to find out who's the man when they fight again. But, yeah, Jones didn't do anything to stop being the champion, in my mind, as far as fighting goes.
Well, if the roles were reversed, what dance could you teach Jon Jones in the next video?
Man, I don't have much variation in my dance. I am a little bit older, so I might have to bring some old school stuff like some Roger Rabbit or the Running Man or something like that. But I bet he knows that.
Yeah, no, he probably does. It's probably good that you're teaching him because we don't know how to dance for anything. You hung out with Craig Robinson from Hot Tub Time Machine. This is the end of Pineapple Express. Tell us, is he as funny in regular life as he is in movies?
Oh, man, Craig's a crack-up, dude. That guy, he's just, not only is he a talented guy, but he's just a character, you know. He's got a joke about everything. He actually came down and did stand-up in Sacramento, and he brought me up on stage and gave me like 5 minutes to talk to the crowd and do some of my own jokes. And I probably stunk it up pretty bad, but I tried my hardest.
Wow. All right. Well, we have to ask you. Can you give us a joke? What did you do up on stage? Do you remember one of them? Can you give us a bit of a taste, a little sample?
I just told some stories. I told a story about, you know, that actress. She just got in trouble for stabbing her boyfriend. What's her name? It's at Reese
Witherspoon?
No, with a knife.
No. Reese Witherspoon. Was that the actress?
No, you didn't get the joke.
Oh my God, I'm an idiot. Wow, but that was pretty good. That was good. We laughed, right? That was good.
Reese Witherspoon, no, with a knife.
Oh man, yeah, that's why we're not comedians.
Got your ass.
Was that one of the jokes? Was that something that you told on stage?
You know, what I did was I told the story about the girl breaking into my house and crapping everywhere, and then I ended with that, and I said, you know, it's crazy that I made headlines with that when there's people like that one actress that just stabbed her boyfriend, and I was like, what's her name? And then I told that joke.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, you know what? It's better than the airplane peanuts joke that we usually lead our comedy off with. Yeah. Now, let's talk about something else that we saw. We saw some crazy stuff going on at the last Team Alpha Male meeting, the team meeting. Now, we imagine it was like Stonecutters in the Simpsons. Would we be right?
You talking about the Alpha Male meeting on my Instagram?
Yeah.
Was it like the Stonecutters?
In
The Simpsons.
Know what that is.
We're Homer Simpson's part of that secret society. I think it's meant to be like a takeoff of the Illuminati.
You know what? We just had fun in there, man. We had a serious conversation, and then I got the surround sound going in my house, and next thing you know, everybody was having a good time, and we made that funny video.
We also saw on Instagram you've been rocking the man bun lately, Urijah. There's a lot of negativity towards man buns. Give us a couple of man bun positives.
See, here I'm a functional guy. That's the reason I wear Uggs, because they're warm, and I usually wear sandals, and when it gets cold enough, I put on Uggs. But I don't really care what things look like or what people think about them. It's a pure function. So that keeps the hair out of my eyes, so I don't get knocked out while I'm blinking.
Well, that's a positive right there. Now, give us quickly your thoughts on the whole Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm fight that happened here in Melbourne, UFC 193. What were your thoughts about Ronda's performance and the overall big win by Holly Holm?
Man, I was pretty impressed with Holly. You always feel bad because Rousey is a friend, and Holm I consider someone that I'm a fan of also, and I've always been friendly with her. But I know Ronda on a deeper level, so seeing her get her face kicked and smashed like that was hard to see. But Holm did an amazing job. And I think what we're seeing is, I mean, people forget how new female mixed martial arts is. It's only been a couple of years. Ronda, who's the most dominant champion of all time, has only had 12 fights. And you're talking about two high caliber females. So you're talking about somebody that is a kickboxing and boxing world champion that's been training for 20 years in one discipline, like diligently, and she's a gifted athlete, etc. Then you're seeing a woman who's been a judo player since she was a young girl and raised by a mom that is super intense and mindful of like making her daughter a champion. There's only very few of those in existence, like very, very few. You know, some girls started wrestling in high school and things like that, but girls that have started from a very young age and have had 20 plus years of training to be combat athletes are very rare. So we got to see those two match off. I think Rousey was aggressive, as she should have been. I think maybe a little more aggressive with takedowns rather than marching forward into stand-up. But, I mean, there's still a lot of growth that needs to happen in the mixed martial arts world for the females, you know?
You mentioned that she was aggressive. Do you think the game plan was flawed? A lot of people think that she shouldn't have tried to outbox a boxer.
I mean, she doesn't necessarily try to outbox her. I don't think. I think she should have used a lot more footwork and head movement, 150%. But, I mean, if you got a girl who's taller and longer and a lot more seasoned stand-up, how are you going to get close to her and take her down, especially when she's been training with one of the best camps in the world on how to not get taken down? I mean, Rousey should have used a lot more footwork and head movement, in my opinion, and maybe practiced up on a little more wrestling, a little less judo. But, you know, it wasn't like all she had to do is snap her fingers and take the girl down. You know, it wasn't that easy. She's dealing with Holly Holm, who's now the most dominant champion out there.
Well, we're going to do a prediction for, obviously, your fight against Frankie Saenz, but just quickly, Uriah, rematch, Ronda Rousey, Holly Holm, UFC 200. Can Ronda win the rematch?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're talking about high-level athletes. I mean, Holly can win also, but, you know, Rousey she's no stranger to defeat. I mean, 12 fights into mixed martial arts she is, but she's been a competitor her whole life, just like, you know, all of us wrestlers and judo players and boxers and kickboxers that have done stuff since we're kids. She's going to make adjustments. They're going to come back and have another great fight. Of course she could win, but Holly could win as well.
And finally, the most important one, what is your prediction? How are you beating Frankie Saenz, the ultra-stacked UFC 194, Uriah?
I just want to finish, whether it's a submission or a KO or a TKO. I just want to finish, and I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to get it, but I'll be doing everything in my power from the get-go to make it happen.
Well, there you guys go. Check out Uriah fighting at UFC 194, December 12th in America and the 13th here in Australia. And make sure to follow Uriah on Twitter at Urijah Faber. Also check him out on Instagram. Lots of great stuff there. Uriah, as always, a real pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much for taking the time and popping on.
You got it, guys. Great to talk to you again.
And there he is, Urijah Faber, back on Submission Radio once again. That concludes the interview portion of the show. We're going to be talking about quite a few things, guys. Actually, what am I talking about? Quite a few things. We're talking about UFC career. That's the main, pretty much only thing we're going to be talking about. We're going to be breaking down the main card, kicking it off with Du Hoi Choi versus Sam Cecilia. Initial thoughts on this one, Dennis? What did you think about this fight and young Du Hoi Choi?
Well, before we even talk about the fight, I mean, the story about this matchup is hilarious and pretty crazy all in itself. They were supposed to originally fight at UFC 173. That was canceled. Then they were supposed to fight UFC Fight Night, Mir versus Duffy. And Choi pulled out both times due to an injury and undisclosed reasons. So they were able to reschedule for UFC career, which is crazy. I mean, if you're Sam Cecilia, you're like, is it going to happen again? Is it not going to happen again? How do I feel about this? But yeah, I thought it was a quick fight. I was really, really impressed with Choi. I mean, in his career, out of all of his 14 fights, he's had 10 KO and TKO stoppages. He's only had one loss. He's only 24 years old. Most of his wins come in the first or second round. I thought he did a really, really good job. His strikes look really good. I'm just really interested to see what this kid can do. What did you think of the fight, Cass? It looked like Sam left himself open in some of the exchanges.
Yeah, he did. You know what? In that final closing combination by Choi, I actually thought that Sam Cecilia paused. He sort of came in with a punch. It looked like he paused for a second. I thought he left himself open, but what I didn't realize until I saw the other angle and the other replay was that Choi actually hit him with an overhand right. He waited, he countered him very, very nicely. He hit that overhand right, and then he hit him with a big left hook that all but put out Sam's lights out. So I was very, very impressed with this kid. He's 24 years old. You know, when you see a guy with a record like this with a whole bunch of KOs and TKOs, and obviously this isn't his UFC debut, but you sometimes wonder, okay, but how good is the competition that he's facing? When you look at regional competition, especially competition in Asia, it isn't always necessarily as good as the competition in the UFC and especially in the States. So far, we've seen that he's held up his own, and this is a great matchup on paper because Sam Cecilia likes to go to war. You know, obviously Duho has a lot of KOs on his resume, so I love the way they put it together. I love the fact that the fight finally came together, and what a great timing for Choi, the fact that he unintentionally stretched out this fight so long to be able to fight in his home of Korea. So it was a really, really good win for him. And I don't know if I said it before, but at 24 years old, I'm very curious where the ceiling is for Choi because he's got a lot of promise.
Yeah, it's interesting because he only fought once this year and once last year. And no doubt about it, it must have been because of some of those undisclosed injuries that he had to pull out all those fights with Celia with. I'm hoping to see him fight a bit more frequently. And, you know, I don't know about this matchup, but I was sort of thinking about it, and Casper sort of chime in and let me know what you think about it. Maybe in a couple of fights' time, he could fight Clay Guida, who's ranked number 14th in the division. I think that could be a good test for him and a good way to get on the map, possibly outside of Korea. What would you think about that matchup?
Who's this, though? Choi against Clay Guida?
Yeah.
Potentially. I mean, Clay Guida, that is a fairly big step-up competition. I believe he said he wanted to fight Kawajiri, who Clay Guida beat recently. So Kawajiri, another legend in obviously Asian mixed martial arts. I guess he's a step slightly below Clay Guida, so maybe give him Kawajiri first, and then afterwards you can give him sort of Kawajiri 2.0 and Clay Guida.
Yeah, that would be great. We'll see what happens. Hope the main thing with this guy is stay injury-free and be able to get out and fight more than once a year, because if he's fighting once a year, obviously he's not going to be able to really show what he can do for a while.
Yes, there you go. Let's move on to the next fight. Welterweight competition, Alberto Mina versus Yoshihiro Akiyama, who I didn't realize his actual name. Well, not actual name. He's half Japanese, half Korean. His Korean name is Chu Sung-hoon. I was surprised that it was actually on his shorts. If I was someone going onto the Reebok website getting a fight kit, I would have expected to be looking under Yoshihiro Akiyama, not Chu Sung-hoon. And prior to this, I don't know if the UFC have actually mentioned it. They may have in the past, but definitely not as much as they did in this card, completely addressing him as Chu Sung-hoon. So something that surprised me.
Yeah, it blows my mind. Huge star in Japan, huge star in Korea, and there you go, another name. So always learning something new about Akiyama. At the age of 40, he's always got a few surprises. But let's talk about the fight, Cass, because this was one of the best fights of the night.
Yeah, so Alberto Mina, you know, coming in there as a massive underdog. I think a lot of people expect Akiyama to go through him. I guess the main thing that I want to talk about is, did the right man win? Was it really Mina? Should it have been Akiyama? Because I know at the end of the third round, or actually once the fight finished, a lot of people expected Akiyama to get his hand raised. I'll give you my thoughts, all right? First round comes out. Not really that much action. Mina's getting the better of Akiyama in the striking. Second run comes out. Akiyama's really sort of putting things together. He's starting to assemble leg kicks. At the end, he obviously gets dropped, really, really, really badly hurt, arguably saved by the bell. And the third round...
Well, sorry to cut in there, Cass, but what do you think of that? Because I was watching the second round over and over, and there was that one point where he gets really, really hurt up against the fence right before the round finishes, and he's fallen down, he's grabbing onto the fence. I actually thought in that moment, a lot of referees would have stopped the fight, especially if they were in close proximity to it.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been upset if the fight was stopped, but I can see why it was left to continue. Akiyama was constantly moving, so I don't have an issue with that stoppage. Do you think it should have been stopped?
Well, when he dropped up against the fence, so earlier on he was contesting it and fighting it, but when he was dropped up against that fence and he just sort of flopped, he tried to grab onto the cage, so it sort of decreased that sort of flopping motion down to the ground. I actually thought it could have been stopped at that moment. Yeah, I did think it could have been stopped.
Okay, well, it's something that didn't jump out at me. I only rewatched the second round once, and I rewatched not even the whole second round, just that final, I guess, you know, whatever, not combination, but those final series of punches. To me, it looked fine. When he walked back to his corner, Akiyama, it reminded me of Lyoto Machida against Luke Rockhold, where he was really, really badly damaged, and I didn't know what kind of Akiyama was going to come back in the third round. And by the time the third round came along and Akiyama came back, you could see that he'd recovered mostly. So that's another reason why I'm sort of okay with that stoppage.
For sure, yeah. And I didn't want it to be stopped, but I could have seen how it could have been stopped at that moment. I feel like if there was like a Herb Dean there and he was in close proximity to him getting dropped like that, I think he would have just waved it off right there.
Yeah.
But I was happy that it went on because, I mean, the third round went on to be very entertaining.
Well, I don't know if I'd really say entertaining. Mina, actually, you know what? No, Mina, a lot of the times was flopping on his back. He was going for some really weak takedowns. He obviously had his leg badly damaged by Akiyama. So I'm not in no way trying to be disrespectful about Mina. Obviously had a lot of heart in continuing the fight. You could see he wanted to do things. His body just wasn't capable of doing. He was shooting for those takedowns. He was pulling guard. Akiyama was constantly trying to fight him. The thing is, Akiyama didn't actually have that much success on the feet. He was by far the more busy guy on the feet. He didn't really land with much. And even though he was stuffing takedowns, he didn't really get that much offense in. The other thing that I was impressed with was the fact that Mina, even though he was on his back, or really he was looking for places to I guess, be on the offensive. So he'd shoot for takedowns, he'd get denied. At the very end of the round, he was on his back, couldn't really do much, but he was still throwing punches at Akiyama. So that's another thing that really impressed me about the fight. But what do you think about the actual decision itself? Do you think the fight should have gone to Mina, or do you think it was Akiyama's fight?
I think it was Mina's fight, just because I rewatched the first round, and I think he won the first round. He obviously won the second round, and Akiyama won the third round. But it was one of those things where Akiyama, I mean, he has a lot of close fights, and out of his 7 UFC fights, he's only won 2 fights. One against Alan Belcher and one against Amir Sadollah. So it was one of those things where it was another sort of, he had some good parts in the fight. He had a good performance, but yet again, he walks away the loser. One of the questions I want to ask you, Cass, before we get your thoughts on whether or not you thought the fight went to the right person was, were you disappointed that Akiyama didn't throw more leg kicks in that third round? Because to me, from my perspective, from an armchair perspective, it seemed like if he would have hit him with a couple more shots to the leg, he would have gone down, wouldn't have been able to get up. The fight would have been over, in my opinion. What did you think? Were you surprised that he didn't throw more leg kicks in that situation?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I was surprised, but you could see there was one leg kick that he threw, and Mina caught it. I think Akiyama understood that Mina was sort of desperate to try and get the takedown, and he was trying to time those leg kicks. So I think it could have been a case where Mina was expecting them, he was looking to catch one, and Akiyama just decided, you know what, I'm going to throw head strikes instead, because he's not going to expect that as much and possibly go for the finish. I think Akiyama just realized Mina was so desperate for the takedown, and Akiyama didn't want to end up on his back and, lose another round.
Yeah, well, it does make a lot of sense, but I wonder what would have happened if you hit him with a couple more, because that leg was brutal. But let me ask you, what do you think? Do you agree? Do you think Mina won the fight?
You know what? When the fight ended, I did think Akiyama got robbed, and then I rewatched. Well, maybe not robbed, but I was like, wow, I expected Akiyama to get the win. I rewatched that first round. Yeah, you're right. Akiyama didn't really do much in that first round. He was clearly Mina's round. He beat up Akiyama on the feet. The second round was going Akiyama's way, but obviously he got dropped and, badly hurt right at the end of the round. So you got to give that one to Mina as well. So they're going in, 10-9 to Mina in the third round. Third round was clearly Akiyama's fight. And for a moment there, I thought, you know what, give him a 10-8. But then again, when I rewatched that third round, Akiyama really didn't have that much offense. There was a lot of missed punches, and a lot of the times when Akiyama would hit Mina with whatever connected, Mina would fire back. Even though it wasn't an impressive win from Mina by any means, at all, he would still throw strikes. He still threw leg kicks. He still threw punches. So without a shadow of a doubt, it was Mina's win.
Yeah, it was a difficult victory for Mina. He took a lot of punishment, but I mean, still, what a fight. I reckon, I don't know about you, Cass, but out of the main card, that was definitely the fight of the night for you. I had a lot of fun watching it, a lot of back and forth stuff. I got to say, the crowd in Korea as well really got behind a lot of these fights. They were loud during the parts where Akiyama was doing well. So, yeah, it was surprise. I wasn't surprised that it was a good fight, but I was surprised about how entertaining and interesting it was. Some of Akiyama's fights can be a bit not boring, but not so eventful. So I thought this fight was quite entertaining and the fight of the night from the main card for me.
Yeah, I really love this one. I got to take my hat off to both guys. Both Mina for really going through all the pain and all the damage that he took to his leg. It looked brutal. It was like, think Urijah Faber against Jose Aldo is turning all kinds of colors, all kinds of purple. And of course, Akiyama, you got to give this guy credit, because if there's anyone who doesn't need fighting, it's definitely Akiyama. He's 40 years old. He's got a ton of fame. He is far more known for other things than he is for being a fighter. I mean, he's a model, he's an actor, I think he's an opera singer. I don't know if it's opera, but he is some kind of singer. He's an absolute celebrity in Korea and in Japan. And again, I can't say this enough, he's 40 years old. So he comes out like once a year, once every year and a half to fight. I'm really impressed with that. And the way he looks at 40 years old, my God, he's I don't know what his body fat percentage is, but he looks like a small version of a bodybuilder. He is ridiculously shredded. For a 40-year-old guy, it's insane.
Yeah, he's like the Japanese version of Brad Pitt.
And
just never ages.
Yeah.
20 years from now, he's still going to look the same.
Pretty much, yeah. No, he's the other it's crazy to me the way he fights, and that he's able to fight as well as he does, just because his physique and his body shape isn't meant for fighting. Like, if you look at a guy like Mina, who's obviously not that muscle bound, but that's kind of the typical fighter nowadays. Trying to be sort of economic, not having any muscle that they don't need. Akiyama, he's clearly going for an aesthetic. Look, his chest is way too big for, what a fighter's chest should look like. Think Thiago Alves back in the day before he got on, the Dolce diet. So it's crazy to me that Akiyama can fight as well as he does, despite having such a physique.
Yeah, certainly. So I guess the thing to come out of this one is, will he fight again? I mean, he hasn't had very much success in the UFC. Like I mentioned before, 7 fights, only 2 wins. If I'm the UFC, I'm still happy to book him because he's a huge star, puts up great fights. But like you mentioned, he has so many other things to do. Will he get in that octagon again? Will he fight again? We'll have to wait and see.
Well, I mean, the thing is, he had a really bad run at one point. He lost 4 in a row to Chris Lieben, Bisping, Vitor Belfort, Jake Shields. Then, like you mentioned, he got that win against Amir Sadala. Now he loses to Alberto Mina. But he's not on a massive decline. I think the UFC kind of keeping him. He's like an ace in the hole. You put him on a Japan card, you put him on a Korean card, and he was a great addition to this card. It's not like he's lost 2 or 3 in a row. He's not even on a losing streak. So, without shadow of a doubt, they'll keep him around. Who knows if he'll even fight again? At this rate, I mean, it's been over a year since we last saw him in the octagon. Before that, it was over 2. So we'll see if he even fights again. But if he does, at 41 years old, it'll be crazy. And I fully expect it to be on like another Korea or Japanese card.
Yeah, certainly. Now, jumping to the next fight, Cass, and this is a product of Jackson Winklejohn. Ariel Helwani spoke to him while he was over there covering Holly Holm. Dominic Waters, a guy that not many people knew about, but he picked up the assignment of fighting Dong Hyun Kim. He wasn't initially supposed to fight Dong Hyun Kim, but because of what happened with the card, there were a lot of injuries. For people that don't know, the card was supposed to have Benson Henderson versus Alves. Alves pulled out with a broken rib. Then it was supposed to have Krokop versus Hamilton. Krokop had to pull out because he injured his shoulder and retired from MMA, and there's some stuff about a drug test that happened as well. And a lot of people got pushed up. So the person that was supposed to fight Dong Hyun Kim actually was in the main event now, Jorge Masvidal, and Dominic Waters got the big call-up to a huge, huge fight over there in Korea.
Yeah, exactly. So Dong Hyun Kim made very quick work of Dominic Waters. Unfortunately for Dominic, I see what he was trying to do. It looked like he was trying to capitalize on anything Dong Hyun Kim did. Dong Hyun, I think he threw a sloppy spinning back elbow and he left himself open, and Dominic Waters sort of shot in and he got him up against the cage. Against most people, that would be the smart thing to do, and I see what he was trying to do. Unfortunately, with Dong Hyun Kim's judo background and being a very, very good judoka, Dominic quickly found himself on the bottom with Dong Hyun Kim on top. That's the other thing. Dong Hyun Kim, he's got very good top control. It's very rare to see somebody finish through a crucifix, but Dong Hyun Kim did it on the night. What did you think of the fight, Dennis?
Yeah, it just reminded me of Roy Nelson from The Ultimate Fighter.
Against Kimbo, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's one of those things that everybody tries to do in jiu-jitsu, like all the old school veterans, the black belts, don't want to use much energy and just teach you what's going on. I thought I was very, very impressed with Kim, and I felt really, really bad for Dominic, who at one point seemed like he thought he was in a dominant position, ended up in such a crappy place on the mat. Also, it's one of those bittersweet losses for Dominic. Not only does he get beaten at the beginning, but it's sort of one of those wins where the guy wins because he's holding your arms back. You can't really defend yourself, but you're not really hurt or anything like that. Happens at the start. It's a tough way to lose. he didn't even get a chance to really do anything. And it's one of those things where while you're flying back to Albuquerque from Korea, you just think over and over about why couldn't I get out of this position? Why couldn't I do more? So I'd say he's pretty disappointed. I mean, this is his second loss in the UFC. The first came against George Sullivan at Tough 21 finale in July this year. So hopefully he gets another chance to show what he's got, because apparently the people at Jackson Winklejohn think he's very talented.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully we see that talent come to fruition. It's also a crappy scenario to prepare for, being in a crucifix like that. Like, you can do jiu-jitsu for years and years, and there's obviously ways to get out of it, but when you're getting punched in the face, it's a completely different story. You know, a lot of that technique sort of goes out the window. Nevertheless, a good win for Dong Hyun Kim. Dominic Waters obviously stepping up on short notice, but the fight was a very, very quick win as well. I don't think it's exactly the kind of fight that's going to shoot him up in the rankings, but at the moment, Dong Hyun Kim's ranked at number 7. Damian Maia's ranked number 6. He wants that rematch when Damian Maia beat him a while back. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. If Damian Maia loses against Gunnar Nelson at UFC 194, then I can see it makes sense. He's coming off a loss. Kim's coming off a win. Maybe they can have a rematch. Obviously, that was a bit of a weird fight as well, because he had some spasms in that fight. So it's something that I'm sure that he'd like to rematch. Every time it comes for Kim to step up with a big name opponent, it just seems like he can't do it. He lost to Condit, Woodley, Maia, and those were some big fights. And even though he's beaten Eric Silva and Matt Brown, it'll be interesting to see if he can get a win over a big name and sort of move up, get past that sort of blockage that he's faced every time he faces someone with name value.
Yeah, and Dong Hyun Kim, I mean, at the moment he's age 34, so he's kind of in his prime. This is sort of make or break. In a few years, he's going to be past his prime. He's going to be heading towards retirement. So I do think this is one of his final runs in terms of title contention. He's on a 2-fight win streak. You know, since losing to Tyron Woodley, he seems to sort of have found a style somewhere between crazy and economic. You know, he's not going for crazy brawls like he did in his last few fights. He's gone back to using his grappling. He beat Josh Berkman, obviously, again with an arm triangle. I believe the first man to ever stop Josh Berkman. And now he's got a nice win against a guy who stepped up on short notice. So it's time for a big step up for Dong Hyun Kim to see if he can actually get into that title contention.
That's right. Now let's jump into that main event cast. Benson Henderson versus Jorge Masvidal, the man that was supposed to fight him in the co-main event. Going into this fight, were you a bit disappointed that Alves was out with a broken rib? Were you looking forward to seeing him fight Henderson?
Oh, yeah, of course. But I mean, that's been the story of Alves' whole career. You know, the guy would have had so many more fights if not for injuries. The other weird thing was that Alves was going to go down to lightweight. So here he was back at, you know, in theory, was supposed to fight at welterweight. And it would have been a great matchup at lightweight or at welterweight. Benson Henderson, obviously fantastic grappler. Thiago Alves, some of the best Muay Thai in welterweight, if not the best Muay Thai in welterweight. So it was going to be a good scrap. Jorge Masvidal, though, very, very, you know, I don't want to say journeyman, but very, very experienced guy, very, very technical. I'd say very, very underrated. What did you think about the matchup? Or more importantly, what did you think of the fight itself?
I was so impressed with Masvidal in that first round. He had some beautiful kicks. He mixed up his striking beautifully. He denied Benson Henderson's takedowns. And I saw that in Benson Henderson's eyes, he was a little bit like, oh, crap. Like, I'm in a real fight here, and this isn't going to be as easy as possibly we thought it'd be. In that first round, I really thought Masvidal looked world class. Eventually, Henderson did wear Masvidal down as the rounds went on. Obviously, for people that may not know, Masvidal was preparing for a 3-round fight, not a 5-round fight. So there was a bit of a difference there in conditioning. Henderson got Masvidal down. He threw some beautiful knees. Masvidal tried to put his hands on the mat so he couldn't knee him in the head. But Henderson timed it really nicely and landed some really good ones on his head.
Just quickly on that note, how good was what Henderson was doing?
Unbelievable.
Where, you know how like normally you get guys like that, they're up against the cage, someone has a front headlock, they can't throw knees because the other guy has, you know, a hand on the mat, and Henderson was sort of jerking him up, getting his hand off the mat and throwing those knees. How good was that?
It was crazy. It was crazy. This is going to be something that people are now going to be drilling in gyms. I don't think many people thought there was a way out of that situation. But Henderson did such a great job, and the knees that he threw were really effective. I mean, and this is what I think sort of took away some of Masvidal's confidence and took away some of the steam from behind his attacks. Afterwards, he still did well. He was still contesting Henderson nicely, but he slowed down a little bit. He didn't mix in his strikes as well. He threw more punches than kicks. Overall, though, I was still very impressed with Masvidal. It was still a very, very close fight. Out of it, though, I took a lot of respect. Obviously, I already respected Benson Henderson, but I just respect the fact that him and his team always find a way to win. He was in a bit of a crummy situation in the first round. I actually thought Masvidal could possibly take it, and they found a way to grind out a win and come out on top. So overall, I thought it was actually quite an interesting fight. It wasn't as interesting near the end of the fight. The beginning was a lot more interesting because Masvidal was throwing a lot better strikes. But it was a good win for Henderson, and I don't think Masvidal loses anything by losing this fight. I think he gets more eyes on him, and now people are looking to his next fight to see what he could do with another opponent. What about you, Cass? What did you think of the fight?
Yeah, I agree. And on that final note about Masvidal not losing steam, I agree. He went to a decision, a 5-round decision against a guy who was a former lightweight champion. You know, Masvidal wasn't preparing for a 5-round fight. He was only preparing for a 3-round fight. I don't think you can take much away from him. And I think with Masvidal, he's versed some of the best in the lightweight division. Guys like Gilbert Melendez, Michael Chiesa, Pat Healy, Cruikshank, James Krause, Cesar Ferraro. Okay, those guys may not be necessarily the best. He's versed Rustam Khabilov, Ali Quinta. Maybe not all the best, but he's versed a big variety of guys. Still, I reckon he's an underrated guy. The only thing that he got in this fight was a lot of exposure. He was in the main event of a card that may have not been the biggest one, but I think he's going to do well for him. I think people understand and respect the grit that he had, and I like the way that both guys cancelled each other out throughout the whole entire fight. You know, Benson Henderson was constantly going for the takedown. Masvidal was constantly fighting it off. The only thing about Masvidal is, you know, sometimes, and I think it happened in this fight, he was a little bit more defense-orientated as opposed to offense-orientated. And a lot of the times he was trying to neutralize Benson Henderson's offense without necessarily getting back with some of his own. I'm very impressed with Benson Henderson. Like you mentioned, the way he grinds out wins, and he does find himself in a lot of split decisions, does Benson Henderson, but more often than not, he does win those. So I'm impressed. The big story coming out from this one is that this is the final fight on Benson Henderson's UFC contract. He took off his gloves at the end. Well, I wouldn't say there's a story. It's almost like a non-story. But when he took off his gloves, a lot of people thinking, what's he doing? Is he retiring? This is his last fight on the UFC contract. Is he trying to send a message? He did speak to MMA Junkie afterwards. Dennis, what did he have to say to the guys?
Yeah, guys, he spoke to the MMA Junkie guys, and he basically said, I'm not trying to send any messages of any type, but if it plays out in a certain way, I want to have some pretty good memories to go out on. He also said, when I retire, I will be retiring in the UFC. I know that for sure, but I'm going to test the market, yes. So basically, taking the gloves off, he thinks didn't really send any message, but at the same time, it could be a message. I'm not sure if he really explained much in that quote.
Blink once for yes, blink twice. Well, he dodged another question when Kenny Florent asked him what weight class will he be at, 170 or 155. He didn't answer that either. It could just be because there was all sorts of shenanigans with all the mic work between the between the translator back to the fighters. Maybe Benson Henderson just forgot. I do think he fights at money weight, whatever. You know, whatever weight class has the big fights, whatever, you know, whoever's willing to fight him, that's where he wants to fight at. He is 32, so the fact that he says that he wants to test the free market but will retire in the UFC sounds like he's wanting to fight for quite a few more years. Let's say he does go to Bellator. I mean, he'd probably be there for at least a year, maybe 2 years. Maybe he'd go somewhere else for 2-3 years and then probably come back to the UFC. So he's probably going to be fighting, you know, right up until the sort of late 30s, maybe even 40s. But the other question is, do you think the UFC will keep him? Do you think they're interested in having Benson Henderson still in the roster?
Well, to me, it seems like the UFC isn't really offering Henderson a great deal, and he really wants to see it bumped up. But I'm not sure if they're going to really be willing to do it. I think there's a couple of train of thoughts here. One of them is Henderson's obviously fought a lot of the guys in the division, and maybe they don't want him to become champion, because even though he is an exciting fighter at times, at other times, some people think he grinds out victories and his fight style isn't as oppressive. So if he leaves the UFC, then maybe they don't have to worry about him becoming champion. But then there's that other train of thought where lately he's been filling in for fights, he's been jumping in for people, he's been a real company man. So at the same time, and he's a pretty good name over there in Korea, like everybody saw, he was very, very popular, and he's quite popular in a lot of places around the world. So at the same time, you have this guy who UFC helped build after he left the WEC and went over. If I was the UFC, I'd want to keep him around. Also, I'd want to keep him around because I wouldn't want him to go over to the competitors. There's some competitors out there, like you mentioned, Casper Bellator, but also World Series of Fighting might go for him, or one championship. That would be a no-brainer for him because a lot of their market is in Asia, and Benson Henderson would do well for them. He could almost be a second face to the company with Ben Askren. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one for me to figure out whether the UFC want to keep him or not. At the moment, it really certainly seems like they didn't give him a sweet deal, and I don't know how these kind of negotiations work with Dana and Lorenzo. I don't know if they really like fighters sort of putting him up against, I don't know, so to say, the heater and making them make a decision. In a lot of those situations before, they've just sort of let fighters go into other places. So I don't think they're intimidated into better offers. I don't know. What do you think about this whole thing, Cass?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily the fact that Benson Henderson doesn't like his show money or his pay money, but I think the sponsors, that's another thing. I don't know exactly how much money he was getting from sponsors, but you would think that if he goes to Bellator, they'll probably give him a decent deal because that's usually how ex-UFC fighters are treated. And then, of course, on top of that, he's got all of the sponsors that he can go into fights with. So I guess that's what he's after. And he probably knows that even though he's 32, which is pretty young for a fighter, he's probably got, I don't know, maybe 4-6 years left in him, maybe even more. Who knows? If he wants to fight into his 40s. So in that time, and he's obviously got his young family, he's got at least one kid, he's got his wife. He probably wants to make as much money as possible at the moment. I don't know what his sort of title aspirations are at the moment, whether he's really gunning for that title, but money is definitely a big thing. As far as the UFC keeping him, I don't know, because the UFC put a lot of money into him in terms of when he was champion, putting him on all those Fox cards, and those are usually vehicles to help build fighters and get their name out there because then they're on free TV as opposed to on pay-per-view. So there's obviously a much sort of wider demographic as opposed to just the hardcore fans. Did that pay off? That's the big question. I don't know if it did. I don't know how many people sort of got Benson Henderson, as far as like a casual level goes. And then you think about Phil Davis in a division like light heavyweight, which a lot of people would agree is a fairly shallow division and needs all the names they can get. And Phil Davis is a good fighter, and yet they were happy to let him go. So I don't know. Benson Henderson, he says he wants to test, I guess, his worth in the free agent market. It could just be a case where he gets a few offers, they bounce back between Bellator and the UFC, or between ONE FC and the UFC, and maybe UFC decides to match him. It may just be testing, what other offers he'll get, but ultimately he'll stay with the UFC. But I don't know, if he goes to another company, I'll be excited to see that.
Yeah, it's one of those things as well where he'll take a huge risk leaving the UFC fighting somewhere else, because once you lose outside the UFC, you get a couple of losses or 1 or 2 losses, you lose a lot of the money value that you'll pull from the other companies. And also you may never get back into the UFC to retire. So there's a lot of stuff to consider there, but I like the theory that you bring in, Cass. Welterweight, lightweight, pretty divisions that have a lot of different competitors, a lot of different fighters. And if they let Phil Davis go from light heavyweight, you'd think that they wouldn't be too worried about filling his spot in those other divisions.
And I guess that is probably one of the biggest differences, that light heavyweight is a very shallow division, lightweight is not shallow at all. So if they do let Benson Henderson go, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other exciting fighters. Yes, he's a former champion, but they're not afraid to, let former champions go. I guess the only other comparison between him and Phil Davis is that neither one of them would, anything's possible, but most likely neither one of them will hold gold in those divisions again. So I don't know. But just like you look at the top 10 at lightweight, you got RDA, Anthony Pettis, Cerrone, Nurmagomedov, Eddie Alvarez, Michael Johnson, Barboza, and then Benson Henderson at number 7. And then behind him is Tony Ferguson. So if Benson left, I don't think the UFC lightweight division would really, miss a heartbeat, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I also don't really think they want to give him a title shot. I think he'd have to put in a lot of work to get a title shot, and maybe it's an easier way without having to constantly sort of figure out a way to get him around these title shots. Maybe you let him go so he doesn't have one. I don't know. It just seemed like to me they didn't want him to have another title shot anytime soon. So maybe that's another way of not having to worry about it. Who knows?
Well, and Dana White said as much. I believe after the second Anthony Pettis fight, Dana White said when you lose twice decisively, it's very hard to give someone another title shot. And we obviously saw that with Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey. I completely agree with you, though, that the UFC wouldn't necessarily want Benson Henderson being their champion just because there are more marketable options. I think if Cowboy Cerrone became champion, whether you like him or not, that'd be great for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you guys go. UFC career, a lot more memorable than a lot of other people thought. And obviously, if it was the card that was originally planned Could have been a lot more exciting, but nevertheless, the Koreans got a great night of fights out of it. They were nice and loud, and overall, I was pleasantly surprised with how everything turned out. Cass, overall assessment of Korea, did you enjoy it?
I did. Everything that I saw was good. I actually missed most of the prelims. Unfortunately, they weren't shown here in Australia. I don't know why. Fox Sports, I don't know what you're doing. I guess they were on the Fight Pass card, but everything that I saw was great, and I did hear that the prelims were good as well. There was a slam KO by Dominique Steele against Dong Hyun Kim number 2, shall we say, in the third round. So there was some great action. Overall, yeah, it was a good card it delivered. What about yourself?
Yeah, thought it was a great card, pleasantly surprised, and good on to all the Korean fans for being so loud and cheering. I really thought it was a great crowd over there. Now, Cass, I just want to quickly, before we go, have a chat to all of our listeners about another movie review. As you know, guys, every week Casper asks me if I have any closing thoughts, and I usually, a lot of times, do close it out with a movie review. A big movie has come out called Creed. It's a continuation of the Rocky series. A lot of people not sure what to expect from this one. Now, I'm pretty sure you haven't watched this one yet, but from all the previews that you've watched, did you sort of expect much from this Creed movie?
You know, I've heard enough of your reviews to sort of go into most movies not expecting much. And also, any movie that I'm interested in, I usually try and avoid watching the trailers just because I don't want any spoilers. Nowadays, there's a lot of crappy movies out there and they try and put as much into the trailer as possible. You pretty much see the whole entire movie, you go into the movie itself, and you're like, wow, those were a bunch of great moments. I literally saw every single one of them in the trailer. When it comes to Creed, I don't know, man. Spin-offs, they usually go one of two ways. They're either really good and they re-energize the franchise, or they're absolute shit and people look at it for what it is, which is just a money-making venture. Which one was Creed, Dennis?
Well, Cash, sometimes movies have a predictable, unrealistic plot and don't do everything right. But the Rocky movies have a way of sort of making audience members feel something. Sometimes if it's Rocky 5, you wonder why you're wasting your time watching something so stupid. But when you watch Creed, you feel a variety of emotions. It's a story about one man who's fighting a battle to be the champ, working with another man who's fighting a battle just to be around. There's similarities, and all the right questions are being asked throughout the movie. You do miss some of the familiar characters. This isn't Rocky Balboa. You can compare Rocky Balboa to going to your school reunion and seeing all your old friends. Creed is more like when you go to university and college and meet a whole bunch of new people. This movie is fresh, yet it's familiar. It's new, yet it's old. Stallone does a great job of playing Rocky and reminds us that he's actually capable of acting and can do a lot more than playing Barney Ross from The Expendables, for example. If you're open to it, this movie will inspire you. If you're negative about the Rocky movie formula, this movie might give you a little bit of a pleasant surprise. But regardless, it holds more than its own. Much like its main character trying to get out of the shadow of his father, this movie gets out of the shadow, out of the typical Rocky movies of the past. I have to say, Casper, I enjoyed it. And you're going to want to know how many Timothy Johnson mustaches I'm giving it, don't you?
Of course, man. That's the only reason why I rock up here every single week. How many Timothy Johnson mustaches does Creed get?
Creed gets 3.5 Timothy Johnson mustaches. It's a great watch, and I recommend everybody checks it out. Rotten Tomatoes gave it 93%, and a lot of critics are saying it's one of the best movies of the year. So definitely, guys, check it out. And for everybody wondering at home how I rate the Rocky movies, this is how they go. So Rocky 1 is obviously the best. Rocky 2. Then I've got Rocky Balboa as number 3, which is the one before this one. Then we've got Creed. Then we've got Rocky 4, which is the one with the Russian. And then Rocky 3 is after that with Mr. T. And finally, Rocky 5, which is the one where they fight in the alley. It was super bad. So there you guys go.
Awesome. That was a great review. And it's also good that you threw in all the other Rocky movies. I think that's it for another week from us. We kind of kept it a little bit short and sweet because last week we had a really, really massive, I think like almost 3-hour episode. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to throw a like. Again, we appreciate you listening. If you don't know, this show can be found on pretty much all platforms: Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, SoundCloud, and YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, send us some questions. What did you think about UFC Korea? Give us your thoughts. I know we didn't really discuss it. Give us your thoughts on the whole Crow Cop situation. Do you think it tarnishes his legacy? If you're not watching on YouTube, if you're listening through the other platforms, we can be reached on Twitter. Give us your thoughts. Give us your comments at SubmissionAUS. Of course, you can jump on our Facebook as well. Facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. As we say every week, we have completely different content on our Twitter and as opposed to our Facebook. The Twitter is mainly GIFs and funny little anecdotes. On the Facebook, it's more sort of of, I guess, statuses to get your opinions. And that's pretty much it, guys. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening.